Chapter 637. At this point, Yu Qianqiu angrily pulled out the big black blade from the ground. He waved the blade twice and pointed it at Hu Yuntian's nose. Senior Sikong, the truth is in front of us. Hurry up and capture these evildoers and punish them severely. Don't let them escape. Looking at his impatient look, it was as if he wanted Sikong Ju's help to capture them. Sikong Ju couldn't help but roll his eyes. What you said is the truth. You want to capture them? In the air, a fatty dressed in blue hugged his belly as he laughed. This person was none other than Pei Fong. Actually, there were many people who wanted to laugh. Nongzhu was one of them. However, she forced herself not to laugh out loud. The corner of Wen Lanfeng's mouth curled into a smile. Hu Yuntian was so angry that he almost became muddle-headed. He immediately roared, "Who said we were going to run? If you're not going to run, then plead guilty obediently and save us the trouble." Yu Qianqiu waved his blade at Sikong Ju and the rest. In the blink of an eye, it became us. It seemed like they were going to carry out the law together. Sikong Ju could tell that Hu Yuntian cultivated under Hu Changshou's protection. Usually, everyone would give in to him. No one dared to talk back to him. He could be unreasonable, but he wasn't good at talking. In the end, he met Yu Qianqiu today. It seemed like he was going to be muddle-headed from anger. If he allowed Yu Qianqiu to continue, Hu Yuntian would definitely plead guilty and submit to the law. This was not the result that Yu Qianqiu wanted. Sikong Ju coughed and said, "Hu Yuntian, are Yu Qianqiu's words true or false?" He was reminding Hu Yuntian to explain himself. It was useless to keep talking to Yu Qianqiu. The matter wasn't even clear. If he talked about pleading guilty, wouldn't he be looking for trouble? Hu Yuntian. Yu Qianqiu pointed with his blade again and quickly snatched the topic. He shouted, "If you have the ability, swear to the heavens that what I just said was false." Hu Yuntian was at a loss for words. He really didn't dare to swear an oath, because what Yu Qianqiu said before was indeed true. However, the tone he used when it happened was completely different from the tone he used when he explained it in front of everyone. Yan Zhuixing and Man Hu glanced at each other. This Hu Yuntian might seem smart, but if it wasn't for his father, he wouldn't be able to achieve anything. Idiot. Hu Changshou's face darkened and he immediately scolded, "Why do you care what he said? Just talk about yourself. What does it matter if you say black is white? I'm here. What are you afraid of?" He just couldn't figure it out. How could a person who usually looked quite shrewd become like this after being angered so casually? After being scolded by his old man, Hu Yuntian suddenly came to his senses. The fury in his eyes gradually calmed down, and he regained his shrewd appearance. He said to Sikong Ju in a clear voice, "Senior Sikong, Yu Qianqiu is talking nonsense. Not a single word is true. It is a fact that he killed people in cornucopia. Everyone saw it. Please punish him severely, senior." These two completely different reactions were because everyone could tell that he was being guided. But this was exactly what Sikong Ju hoped for. Sikong Ju tilted his head and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, Hu Yuntian said that everything you said was a lie. What else do you have to say?" Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at Hu Changshou in the sky, then looked at Hu Yuntian, and revealed a mocking expression of exasperation at Hu Changshou's failure to meet his expectations. He shook his head and sneered, "This person is already shameless to the point of lying with his eyes wide open. What else do I have to say? If I continue talking, it will just be a result of not acknowledging each other. It's simply a waste of saliva. Senior Sikong, why don't you be more direct?" Sikong Ju let out an "oh," and his eyes flickered as he asked, "How to be more direct?" Yu Qianqiu stared at Hu Yuntian and sneered, causing Hu Yuntian's hair to stand on end. Suddenly he saw the blade in his hand pointing at him and said, "Hu Yuntian, I'll still say the same thing. There's no meaning in arguing with your glib tongue. Why don't you and I fight one-on-one, and we won't rest until one of us is dead. Whoever dies will be unlucky. How about it?" The surrounding crowd went into an uproar again. This madman's killing desire was very strong. He was indeed worthy of the title of butcher. It seemed like he really wanted to slaughter Hu Yuntian. If he didn't have the confidence to slaughter Hu Yuntian, he definitely wouldn't keep mentioning about fighting one-on-one. Although no one said it, they actually hoped that Hu Yuntian would accept the challenge. They just treated it as watching the show. In the crowd there was a pair of bright eyes. Yan Yu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression. With the commotion caused, it was impossible for her not to have heard the news. Originally she didn't want to come, but for some reason she still came. Farong Zi and the rest were currently anxiously pacing around the Wen clan's shop. They really wanted to come over and take a look, but before Nongzhu came out, he ordered them not to come out. Hu Yuntian was challenged by him again, and his expression was dark and gloomy, showing signs of going berserk. If he still didn't accept the challenge, how would he still have the face to mingle in the cultivation world? Right at this moment, Hu Changsho transmitted his voice. Is your face more important or your life more important? Don't let your imagination run wild and push the problem to Sikongju. Hu Yuntian took a deep breath and cupped his hands towards Sikongju. Senior Sikong, Cornucopia is the territory of the World Commerce Guild. What do you think? Sikongju decisively rejected. Cornucopia doesn't allow private fights. I think this matter will be investigated one day. Why don't we put it aside for now and deal with it after the matter is investigated? What if the matter is never investigated clearly? Laughter came from the sky. Pei Fang's fat face shook as he said, in my opinion, Yu Qinsho's idea is not bad. Instead of dragging it on, it's better to fight to the death. Once and for all, there won't be any trouble in the future. Hu Changsho and Bing Qingzi swept a cold glance over. Pei Fang was obviously up to no good. The latter met their gaze and smiled indifferently. Anyway, no matter who died, he wouldn't lose anything. It seemed that Hu Yuntian was more likely to die. If he could take the opportunity to attack Hu Changsho, why wouldn't he do it? If Yu Qinsho died, it would be even better if Wen Lanfeng did something else. Yu Qinsho naturally knew that this damn fatty was up to no good by fanning the flames, but he really wanted to kill Hu Yuntian while Wen Lanfeng was here. After making up his mind, he sneered, Hu Yuntian, since private fights aren't allowed in Cornucopia, we might as well settle this outside. If you're afraid of me, you might as well bring your 3 guards with you. If you're still afraid. Dao Feng pointed at Yan Juexing and Man Hu and said, it doesn't matter if the 6 of you come at me together. I'll definitely keep you company until death. How about it, do you dare? When he was still at the nascent soul stage, he dared to fight with those at the end of the crossing calamity stage. Now that he was at the crossing calamity stage, there was nothing to be afraid of. In addition, after experiencing the beauty of the animal play, he believed that killing Hu Yuntian wouldn't be a problem. The reason why he also involved Yan Juexing was because he wanted to test his opponent's depth. If possible, he might as well take advantage of Wen Lanfeng's presence to get rid of this trouble in the future. This was simply a naked provocation. 1 against 6, almost forcing Hu Yuntian into a dead end. In the air, Hu Changsho's eyes narrowed. Yu Qinsho had gone too far and he couldn't help but get angry. Bing Qingzi also seemed to be a little tempted. Hu Yuntian and Man Hu, who were at the end of the crossing calamity stage, were not necessarily no match for Yu Qinsho. Maybe he could take the opportunity to take revenge for his second disciple. Good. Pei Fang cheered. No wonder you're the #1 expert below the soul-forming stage. You're really brave. He didn't expect that Yu Qinsho would even involve Bing Qingzi's disciple, so he was naturally excited. Lu Yanqing frowned at Yu Qinsho's belligerent behavior. When Lanfeng seemed to be a little worried and asked Nongzhu, Yu Qinsho is only at the early stage of the crossing calamity stage. Won't he underestimate his opponent? Nongzhu replied with a relaxed face, I don't know what he wants to do. But don't worry, he won't do anything that will cause him to lose. Man Hu took a step forward lightly. He also wanted to take the opportunity to take revenge for his junior brother. Unexpectedly, Yan Juexing grabbed him and walked to Hu Yuntian's side, saying with a smile, Brother Hu, Senior Pei has already said that Brother Yu is the #1 expert below the soul-forming stage. How can we defeat him so easily? It's not wrong for us to admit defeat to someone who can be praised by Senior Pei. Originally he wanted to let Yu Qinsho and Hu Yuntian do it. It had nothing to do with him, so he kept his mouth shut and did not answer. Unexpectedly, Yu Qinsho also involved him in Man Hu. If Hu Yuntian accepted the challenge, it would be inexcusable for them not to fight. Therefore they came forward to help Hu Yuntian, the fool who was outwardly smart but inwardly stupid. In fact, it was not that Yan Juexing did not want to fight. In fact, he wanted to try the effect of his demonic power against Yu Qinsho. The demonic power had been stimulated by Yu Qinsho's words, and it was running automatically in his body. However, there were too many people watching. The power of the demonic power was extraordinary. Once he fought, he would definitely be exposed. Now that he did not have the ability to protect himself, he had to bear with it. After he got the 7-star blood orchid to improve his cultivation, everything would be easy. Although Hu Yuntian was angry at Yu Qinsho's arrogance, he was still a little afraid of him. It should be known that the butcher in the cultivation world was famous for killing. Many experts at the final stage of the passing calamity stage had died in his hands. Now that Yan Juexing gave him a way out, he smiled calmly and said, Brother Yan is right. Since Senior Pei praised him so much, it's not wrong for us to admit defeat. He waved his hand heroically and said, "I admit defeat and stop fighting." Yu Qianzhou was startled. He did not expect that they would admit defeat even after he had said so much. Pei Fong was stunned. He wanted to slap himself. If he had known earlier, he would not have interrupted. Hu Changshou glanced at Yu Qianzhou with a malicious gaze. Then he smiled at Wen Lanfeng and said, "Brother Wen, the heroes are here to watch the show. If this matter continues, we as guests will not give face to the host. I think it's better to follow the host's idea and temporarily put this matter aside. We will talk about it after the investigation. What do you think?" Although others thought that Yu Qianzhou had to listen to Wen Lanfeng did not think that he could be Yu Qianzhou's master. Just as he was about to use words to evade, he heard Lu Yanqing, who was beside him, say, "Isn't it better to solve it peacefully? Why must we fight and kill?" Wen Lanfeng was startled. He looked down and said, "Yu Qianzhou, since they have admitted defeat, you should also take a step back. Let's talk about this later." Yu Qianzhou was speechless. Without Wen Lanfeng's support, he did not have the ability to kill Hu Changshou's son in front of him. Moreover, there was Bing Qingzi eyeing him covetously. He glanced at Nongzhu, but Nongzhu also shook her head slightly. "Damn it. Relying on others to support you is the most unstable thing. In the end, you still have to rely on yourself. Let's wait and see." With a calm face, Yu Qianzhou put away the big black saber. He turned around and walked to the original stall. He took out pots of 7-star blood orchids and shouted to the crowd, selling 7-star blood orchids in large quantities. 200 million per plant. Those who are willing to buy, come quickly. Chapter 638. Everyone could hear the resentment in his voice. The onlookers looked at each other. It seemed that this guy was unhappy that he didn't kill Hu Changshou's son. Hu Changshou's eyes flashed with killing intent. He turned around and disappeared in the air. Hu Yuntian happily said goodbye to Yan Juixing and Man Hu and left as well. The 3 guards went to Yu Qianzhou's stall in fear to clean up their colleague's corpse. This guy was so crazy that he didn't even put Hu Changshou in his eyes. They were really worried that he would do something out of line again. The 3 of them buried their heads in collecting the corpse. They didn't even have the courage to look up at Yu Qianzhou. Sikongju took a deep look at Yu Qianzhou and waved his hand at Mu Lianxiu and the others. He led the crowd away and continued to maintain the order of the cornucopia. Seeing that the show had come to an end and that there was nothing to see, the rulers in the air all disappeared. When Lanfeng looked at Nongzhu and smiled bitterly as if saying, "This guy won't bear a grudge against me, right?" The 2 of them disappeared together with Lu Yanqing. Bing Qingzi's pupils shrank when he saw Yu Qianzhou's blood orchid. His eyes flickered and he left. Only Yan Juixing and Man Hu didn't leave. Soon, the stalls that were divided by white lines returned to their original appearance. Regardless of whether it was the stall owners or the people lingering there, their gazes were always faintly discernible as they looked at Yu Qianzhou, filled with reverence. She had heard many rumors about Yu Qianzhou, but this was the first time she had seen him act so domineering. He killed a cultivator in the early stage of tribulation passing just because of a disagreement, and that cultivator was a disciple of the world-famous Cloud Palace. Then, he brazenly challenged 6 disciples of the Cloud Palace and Ice Palace in front of everyone, including 2 experts in the late stage of tribulation passing. In the end, the disciples of the Cloud Palace and Ice Palace admitted defeat and retreated. In addition, Pei Fong, an expert in the late stage of spirit severing. Now in everyone's mind, Yu Qianzhou was the #1 expert below the spirit severing stage. Mo Xiaojun stood quietly behind Yu Qianzhou, his attitude becoming more and more respectful. Niu Yid had appointed them as the leader, and he did not disgrace them. Yi Cheng, who was standing at the side, looked at Yu Qianzhou with even more admiration. Perhaps it was because of the sense of identity, he didn't feel that Yu Qianzhou's actions were too arrogant. Instead, he thought that Yu Qianzhou had won glory for the Chinese cultivation world. In fact, there were many disciples from various sects who had snuck in from the Chinese cultivation world. Unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to get close to Yu Qianzhou like Yi Cheng did. But it didn't affect their crazy worship of Yu Qianzhou at all. Usually they didn't dare to raise their heads here. Suddenly seeing such a figure in the cultivation world of Wuxia, they were simply overwhelmed with emotions, unable to calm down and extremely excited. Was Yu Qianzhou arrogant? Not at all. They couldn't wait for Yu Qianzhou to be 10,000 times more arrogant. It would be best if he could trample all the countries under his feet. After silently admiring him for a while, they left quietly. They wanted to report what had happened here to the Chinese cultivation world as soon as possible. Not long after, Farong Zi, Enchantress and Amano came running. After Nongzhu went back, seeing that the situation had calmed down, she allowed them to come out. Are you all right? The three girls asked almost at the same time. What can happen to me? When Yu Qianqiu saw Farong, the haze on his face turned into a smile and he asked, What are you doing here? Do you want to help me set up a stall? Wow. Ziyi stared at Xuelan in the stall and exclaimed, Selling things is such a fun thing. Why didn't you invite me? Then she crossed the stall excitedly and pushed Yu Qianqiu away. She stood on the seller's seat and looked around as if she really hoped that someone would come to buy things from her. She usually spent money to buy things, but this was the first time she tasted selling things. Farong didn't want to be outdone. She stood beside Ziyi happily, and the two of them shared the feeling of being a stall owner. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. These two women didn't know how hard it was to earn money, and they thought it was a fun thing. If there was a chance in the future, he would let them play every day. Let's see if they would still be in such a good mood. I also want to have a taste of living off a woman. Enchantress stood beside Yu Qianqiu with a smile, while Amano, Ziyi and Imo Xiaojun stood side by side, looking around vigilantly. Yi Cheng glanced at Farong from time to time, trying to hide the shock in his heart. Although Hibiscus rarely showed her face on the supporting Immortal Island, she had coincidentally seen her once in the Myriad Fragrance Garden. After careful observation, he confirmed that she was the daughter of Wanfen Garden's principal elder, Farong. What he couldn't understand was why Farong and Yu Qianqiu were here together. Senior Yu, this junior still has some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. Yi Cheng suddenly bowed respectfully to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded at him. Farong took a glance and realized that this person looked familiar, but she couldn't recognize him, so she didn't think too much about it. After Yi Cheng got permission, he quickly walked out of the treasure basin. He wanted to think of a way to send this shocking news back to Fuxian Island. Yan Zhuixing squinted his eyes as he sized up Ziyi, Farong, and Enchantress. His lips curled into a meaningful smile. Yan Zhuixing nodded at Manhu, and the two of them walked towards Yu Qianqiu's stall. Because of the commotion earlier, the bustling crowd didn't dare to come over, causing the stall to be abnormally quiet. There wasn't even a single person passing by, and everyone took a detour. Just as Ziyi was feeling depressed, she suddenly saw two people walking over. She immediately said excitedly, Are you buying? How much do you want to buy? Before she could finish, she realized it was someone she knew from the saber drawing assembly. Miss Yi, long time no see. Yan Zhuixing cupped his hands. Yu Qianqiu sneered, Brother Yan, could it be that you want to wreck my stall again? When Ziyi heard that they wanted to wreck her stall, she immediately took out her dark purple bamboo rod and was about to make a move. Brother Yu, it's meaningless to say that. Yan Zhuixing glanced at the blood orchids on the stall and said with a smile, I saw that Brother Yu's stall was deserted, so I wanted to invite Brother Yu to visit our Ice Palace's shop when you have time. Perhaps there are people who will purchase a large amount of Brother Yu's 7-star blood orchids. Could it be him? Yu Qianqiu's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show it on his face. He cupped his hands and said, Thank you for the reminder, Brother Yan. I will definitely pay a visit. Then I won't disturb Brother Yu's business anymore. Goodbye. Yan Zhuixing cupped his hands and left with Manhu. Yu Qianqiu stared at the two's departing figures with flickering eyes. Suddenly he was pulled back to reality by the noise around him. He saw many people rushing towards the center of the treasure basin. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? The World Commerce Association put up a new signboard and started selling the 7-treasure pill that can help break through the bottleneck of cultivation. Then we have to hurry and take a look. Maybe we loose cultivators will have a chance to buy it and make a huge profit. When the news about the 7-treasure pill came from the crowd, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, Young Master Mo, go take a look. Yes. Young Master Mo accepted the order and left. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed into slits as he muttered to himself, Selling the 7-treasure pill? Yin Baikong, your time of misfortune has come. Ever since he used Niu Yud's identity to sell the last batch of limit-breaking pills to Yin Baikong, he had decided to stop. It wasn't that he didn't want to make more money, but after seeing the various countries and Yin Baikong's secret game, he knew that he wouldn't be able to make a fortune for long. Even though the country's alliance was crushed by Yin Baikong once, none of them were to be trifled with. They definitely wouldn't sit by and watch the World Commerce Association continue like this. To be able to become a lord in the cultivation world, no one was a fool. This was because Yin Baikong's methods of accumulating wealth hadn't reached the point where it hurt everyone's bones. Now wasn't the time to make a move against a colossus like the World Commerce Association. Because some people were still holding a wait-and-see attitude, They were afraid of being attacked by the powerful World Commerce Association. But once Yin Baikong's methods of accumulating wealth hurt everyone's vitality, the various powers wouldn't be able to sit still and would definitely join forces. At first, Yu Qianqiu was curious as to what kind of backing Yin Baikong had to dare to do such a thing. He wasn't a fool. But after thinking about it from his own point of view, he suddenly realized that this old fox was relying on Niu Yid, an immortal from the immortal world. Yin Baikong first boldly threw out several billion, taking the risk of paying first before taking the goods. Then, for every 5,000 limit-breaking pills, he took the initiative to increase the price by 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, constantly expressing goodwill towards Niu Yid. The reason why he didn't hesitate to cooperate with Niu Yid to do business was to tie Niu Yid's interests tightly with his. Once the various powers retaliated, not only would it hurt his interests, it would also hurt Niu Yid's interests. Yu Qianqiu thought that if he really was Niu Yid, who had the strength of an immortal from the immortal world, he definitely wouldn't sit by and watch his interests be harmed. At the crucial moment, he would not hesitate to come out and intimidate everyone. After thinking about this, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. If he hadn't taken the initiative, Yin Baikong would have really used this opportunity to rise up and become an unshakable overlord of the cultivation world. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but admire Yin Baikong's foresight. Ever since he found out that Niu Yid was an immortal from the immortal world, he immediately started to make plans. This kind of courage and foresight made others sigh in admiration. As expected, he was someone who could achieve great things. It wasn't by chance that the World Commerce Company could reach its current state. After understanding the implications, Yu Qianqiu knew that this was the end of his fortune, and it wasn't good for him to meddle any further. Thus, he decisively threw out 20,000 limit-breaking pills at once. After making a huge profit, he quickly got rid of Niu Yid's identity. Then he immediately used Yu Qianqiu's identity to send out 5,007 treasure pills that buried the World Commerce Company. He wanted to see how Yin Baikong would clean up this mess. The only thing that made Yu Qianqiu regret was that he didn't think so far ahead. He regretted getting himself involved with Niu Yid. In the future there might be some small troubles. Demon Domain Yin Wind Valley. The mountains that stretched for dozens of miles had been sealed off by thick Yin fog for countless years. Raging Yin winds carried Yin phosphorus ghost flames everywhere. Although the environment was harsh, it was a rare cultivation treasure land with abundant Yin chi for the hundreds of thousands of ghost cultivators who lived here. Just as the ghost cultivators were cultivating as usual, a gust of Yin chi that was as thick as ink suddenly erupted violently from the entrance of the 9th Netherworld cave. The strong airflow whistled out crazily, and even the nearby rocks that weighed hundreds of kilograms were blown away. In an instant, the dark clouds that covered the sky above the Yin Wind Valley became restless, causing the hundreds of thousands of ghost cultivators to look over. An indescribable feeling of terror spread in the hearts of the ghost cultivators. Just when the Nether cave had just undergone an unusual change, inside the Ghost King Palace, Yu Ji led the group of ghost generals and arrived one after another. Braving the strong wind, they landed a few hundred meters away from the Nether cave. All of them were bewildered. Yin chi that was as thick as ink continuously whistled out of the cave along with the strong wind. Chapter 639. Such a thick Yin energy for ghost cultivators was something that they could not wish for. However, such an abnormal change caused the hearts of all the ghost cultivators to be filled with terror. It was a type of terror towards the unknown. Yu Ji pursed her lips, her hair blowing in the strong wind. The group of ghost generals behind her also had bewildered gazes, not knowing what was going to happen. Shuntian Island by Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in a large room, suddenly opened his eyes and suddenly disappeared from the room. When he reappeared, he was already standing at the edge of the 1,000-mile lake, facing the direction of the Yin Wind Valley, holding a bright moon in one hand. More accurately, it was a mirror that glowed with a bright white light. All of a sudden, the white light retracted back into the mirror. On the surface of the ancient and smooth mirror that was lined with vine patterns, the scene in front of the 9 nether caves suddenly appeared. Even the bewildered Yu Ji and the others appeared in the mirror. The mirror floated in front of him. Bai Changchun frowned, his eyes filled with puzzlement. He clearly did not know what was going on. Inside the 9 netherworld cave, after crossing the netherworld flame sea, the majestic underworld gate let out a deep and heart-palpitating sound. The gap of the gate gradually became larger, and the netherworld flame sea that had been burning for who knows how many years began to violently shake. The chaotic airflow caused the various skeletal statues on the huge underworld iron mountain to let out all kinds of cries. Men and women, old and young, large and small, the skeletal statues seemed to come to life, crying to someone about the misfortune of their previous life. All kinds of cries gathered in the underground space, echoing endlessly, creating a scene of chaos. If Yu Qianshou was here, he would definitely be shocked. The underworld gate that had been closed for who knows how many years was actually slowly opening. When the majestic, thick and dark underworld gate opened to a meter wide, it stopped moving. Behind the gate, there was a black light constantly rotating. Suddenly 2 white lights flashed. With 2 shio-shio sounds, the 2 white lights turned into 2 figures that stopped in front of the underworld gate. 2 white-robed men that looked exactly the same appeared. Their faces were also snow-white and pale, so pale that it was a bit abnormal, as if they were twin brothers. The 2 of them coldly looked around. After a long time, one of them slowly said, "Everything is normal." Another person nodded and said, "Big brother, why did the Underworld Emperor ask us to patrol the underworld ways of the 72 worlds?" The former shook his head and said, "It was Lady Blackpool's idea." Hearing this, the latter was taken aback and sighed, "Big brother, have you noticed that because the Underworld Emperor doesn't get involved in the affairs of the underworld, Lady Blackpool has been getting involved in more and more things? I'm afraid it's not a good thing." "Shut up if you don't want to get into trouble," the former warned. "This is not something you and I should worry about. Don't say such things in the future." "Got it." The latter shook his head helplessly. The former sized up his surroundings once more and said calmly, "Let's go. Let's go back." The 2 of them had just turned around when they suddenly shuddered at the same time. Their gazes burned as they stared at the netherworld gate. Of the 2 knockers on the gate of the netherworld, only one remained. One of the heaven-devouring beast heads was missing. Not only a knocker, but 2 of its fangs were also missing. No one knew where they went. After the 2 of them stared at it for a while, the latter said in bewilderment, "Look at the saw marks on it. It seems that it was cut off by someone." The former was dumbfounded and speechless for a while. Then he murmured, "Who is so daring to destroy the things on the gate of the netherworld?" The latter scratched his head and said, "Logically speaking, it's impossible. This is not a place that anyone can come to. The people of the underworld can't open the gate of the netherworld from the inside without the token. And the mortals of the outside world can't pass through the netherworld fire sea and come here. Could it be the work of the ghost cultivators in the human world?" The former shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be the ghost cultivators. Once the ghost cultivators come here, their vitality will be burned away by the netherworld fire sea and they can't return to the human world. Otherwise, their souls will be destroyed and they will never be able to reincarnate. The only way for the ghost cultivators to come here is to open the gate of the netherworld and return to the underworld. Once they turn back, they will die. It's not this and it's not that. What is going on? It can't fall down by itself, can it? Even if it fell down, we should still be able to see something on the ground. There are clear saw marks on it. Could it be?" The latter suddenly stopped talking. The former turned his head and asked, "Could it be what?" The latter looked around and said softly, "Big brother, don't you think this is a little strange? Why did Madame Blackpool have to patrol the 72 underworld passages at this time? It just so happened that the gate of the netherworld here was destroyed. Could it be that someone inside was ordered to come out and do it?" The former heard this and frowned deeply. After thinking for a long time, he said in a deep voice, "Don't make wild guesses. We just need to report it truthfully. We don't need to worry about other things. Let's go back." The 2 of them turned into 2 white lights and shot into the gate of the netherworld. They instantly disappeared into the black light that rotated like a disc-shaped flowing cloud. Not long after, the gate of the netherworld let out a dull sound that made people's hearts palpitate again and slowly closed. The moment the door closed, the underground space that had been created by the chaotic images slowly returned to normal. Outside the 9th netherworld cave, the surging strong wind suddenly gradually slowed down, and the ink-like yin qi also slowly withdrew. Very soon, everything returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Standing on the opposite cliff wall, Yu Ji and the group of ghost generals were looking at each other. None of them knew what was happening in the underworld cave. The group of ghost cultivators waited for a long time, but they didn't see any abnormal reaction. Yu Ji frowned and waved her hand, "We'll talk about it when we get back." Then the group of ghost cultivators quickly left the place. Beside the 1,000 Miles Lake on Shantian Island, Bai Changchun waved his hand after the scene in the mirror of silence returned to normal. He waved his hand and kept the mirror as he looked at the sky with his hands behind his back. No one knew what he was thinking. The vast netherworld formed a world of its own. The ultimate place of birth, aging, sickness, and death was the netherworld. 20 big blood-red words were engraved on a huge black stone tablet. They could be seen clearly from afar. The stone tablet and the ancient words revealed the vicissitudes of time. They were simple and unadorned, yet extraordinary. Anyone who saw it would have the urge to prostrate themselves in worship. Under the base of the stone tablet that looked like a mountain, a gate slowly opened. 2 white lights flashed and the gate slowly closed. The 2 people who appeared in front of the gate were the 2 white-robed men who appeared outside the gate to the netherworld. In front of the gate, there were 2 soldiers in iron armor guarding. They were tall and sturdy, their backs were strong and their waists were strong. Their eyes were wide like copper bells as they stared at the newcomers. The 2 white-robed men each turned to face a soldier and took out a green token the size of a palm. They said, "Lu Ben Lu Pao returned to the netherworld to report." They took out the token to prove that they were not ghost cultivators from the outside world. The guards here only recognized the token. Without the token, they would be escorted to the endless dark cliff to work as laborers. One of the soldiers shouted in a booming voice, "Since you have the token, you are not allowed to stay. Leave quickly." His loud voice echoed in the surroundings. The 2 white-robed men didn't say anything else. They cupped their fists and turned into 2 white lights as they fled into the distance. The 2 of them had been flying at high speed in the darkness. It was dark everywhere. Only the red flowing lava could be seen on the ground, mixed with the black smoke. On the path separating the ground from the lava, one could see a group of people working with thick iron chains with their upper arms bare. The sun, moon, and stars could never be seen here, and the sky was always shrouded in darkness. This place was vast and boundless. Nobody knew how high the sky was or how wide the earth was. There was only endless darkness. It was because this was the underworld, a world of its own. In the vast depths that ordinary people couldn't know of, there were countless powerful overlords who carved out territories to carve out territories. Even though they had high cultivation states and powerful magic power, they had to submit to one person, the king of the entire underworld, the emperor of the underworld. As for the name of the emperor of the underworld, very few people knew it. Almost no one knew it. People only knew that he was called the Emperor of the Underworld. It was because the Emperor of the Underworld had existed for too long. All the overlords rose and fell. Only the Emperor of the Underworld existed forever in the Underworld. No one could challenge his authority. Even though the Emperor of the Underworld rarely showed his power, and few people knew what he looked like, those who tried to challenge the Emperor of the Underworld were all killed. The Emperor of the Underworld was a figure that most people in the Underworld could only see once in their lives. Even if they saw him, no one would know that he was the Emperor of the Underworld. The twin brothers Lu Ben and Lu Pao were very lucky. They knew what the Emperor of the Underworld looked like because they had seen the Emperor of the Underworld, and because they worked in the Underworld Royal Palace. Even though their cultivation states were not high, and they were just small errand boys, they had seen the Emperor of the Underworld. The towering Emperor of the Underworld mountain. It had been standing there for countless years. Maybe it had been there since the beginning of time. It was the most sacred place in the entire underworld. Because the most honorable and holy emperor of the underworld lived in the magnificent underworld royal palace on the peak of the mountain. On the emperor of the underworld mountain, flowing lights were flying everywhere. They were fist-sized fireflies. Even though they looked ferocious, the light balls on their tails were unusually bright. It was these flying insects that illuminated the entire emperor of the underworld mountain. There were 6 mountain peaks on the emperor of the underworld mountain. The Emperor of the Underworld was on the highest mountain peak. The other 5 mountain peaks were in the shape of a pentagram, surrounding and protecting the most sacred Emperor of the Underworld. Of course, there was also a magnificent palace on each of the other 5 mountain peaks. The masters of those palaces were all figures whose status was second only to the Emperor of the Underworld. However, there were differences in status among the 5 masters. The master who lived on the first mountain to the left of the Emperor of the Underworld was the one with the most power and the highest status among the 5 masters, besides the Emperor of the Underworld. For many years, the Emperor of the Underworld rarely showed up and interfered with anything. Most of the affairs were handled by this master. Lu Ben and Lu Pao landed on this mountain peak. To be exact, they landed outside the gate of the palace on the mountain peak. Even though they worked in the Emperor of the Underworld, they didn't dare to trespass this palace. The Dark Palace of Madame He Chi. Chapter 640. In front of the Grand Palace Gate, there were 2 rows of soldiers standing guard. All of them wore black iron armor. The strangest thing was that everyone wore a black iron mask on their faces. The mask was hideous and terrifying like a demon. The indifferent gaze from the 2 holes made people shudder. It was Lu Ben's first time here, but he knew that these black-armored soldiers were soldiers transferred from the Onyx Army. The Onyx Army was a powerful army that terrified the people of the underworld. They were Madame Blackpool's personal guards. Many large fireflies climbed on the palace gate, illuminating the scene in front of the palace gate clearly. However, it also showed the oppressive atmosphere in front of the palace gate. A heavily armored general stood in the middle of the palace gate. His gaze behind the mask seemed to be real as he sized up the two. The eldest of the twins, Lu Ben, was obviously not here for the first time. He nodded at his younger brother, Lu Ben. The latter took out a green token and gave it to him. Lu Ben held the two tokens and said respectfully, Lu Ben, report to Madam. You come in. You stay here and wait." The general in the middle of the palace gate pointed at the two and moved aside to make way. Lu Ben signaled his brother to wait patiently and then walked in with large strides. The inside of the palace was spacious and grand, but it seemed deserted. There didn't seem to be a single person in sight. In the middle, there was a passageway that led straight to the towering Onyx Palace. Every 10 meters there was a diamond-shaped stone pillar. The stone pillar was covered with huge fireflies, decorating the entire stone pillar into a lamp post. The path to the majestic Onyx Palace was more than 300 meters long. Although there wasn't a single person in the square, Lu Ben didn't dare to be careless. He looked straight ahead and maintained a steady pace as he walked forward. He knew that this seemingly free space was actually tight on the inside and heavily guarded. It was several times stricter than the Onyx Palace's defenses. Who knew how many people were secretly watching him? The majestic Onyx Palace was brightly lit. Lu Ben bowed and stopped under the base platform that was dozens of meters high. On top of the steps, a female official wearing a male civil official uniform looked down at him. Although she was dressed in a man's uniform, she had a pretty face and was a beauty. She said coldly, "Madam is bathing." "Wait." Then she turned and left. "Yes." Lu Ben lowered his head and stood there, not daring to move. In the back hall of the Onyx Nether Palace, there was a place covered by a black veil that was steaming hot. Behind the gauze curtain was a huge bathing pool made of black jade. The warm water in the pool carried a faint smell of sulfur. It flowed into and out of a small ditch. It was a hot spring. A naked and delicate body was soaking in the water. It was a body that was extremely alluring to men. Her plump breasts rose high, and her skin was as smooth as cream. Her figure was moderately plump, and a beautiful face appeared on the surface of the water. Her head was resting on the thigh of the man behind her, and two hands were gently massaging her temples. The body that men couldn't refuse was soaking in the hot spring. 5 handsome and strong men surrounded her, not even a single strand of cloth on them. Although those alluring bodies were irresistible to men, there was no trace of impulsive desire in the eyes of these 5 men. Their expressions were cautious. 2 hands were massaging her head, and the remaining 8 hands were carefully massaging various parts of her body. The plump and ravine private parts were not left behind. The 8 hands were moving and massaging every part of her body. Resting on the thigh of the man, the beautiful face looked extremely comfortable. Her eyes were hazy and her lips were slightly open, letting out a soft moan. The gauze curtain was lifted, and the female official who was outside the hall walked in. Seeing that the woman in the pool was enjoying herself, she lowered her head and waited quietly. The woman in the pool closed her eyes and said, "Fei Feng, what's the matter?" Although her words were normal, her tone was full of arrogance. The female official who was called Fei Feng said respectfully, "Madam, Lu Ben, who was patrolling the 72 world passages, has returned to report. He is waiting outside the hall." The woman in the pool softly nodded and slightly raised her hand. The 5 massaging men immediately stopped. The 5 men gently carried the naked body out of the hot spring and put her down on the shore. Immediately, someone brought a towel to dry the water droplets on her body. Another person brought a black palace gauze dress and helped her put it on. The black gauze curtain was lifted, and a beautiful woman wearing a black palace gauze dress walked out. Her face was so cold that no expression could be seen on it. She had an extremely noble temperament, which was completely different from her appearance in the hot spring. Dragging a 3-meter-long skirt, she walked to the main hall and gently sat on the seat of honor. Her phoenix eyes coldly looked outside the hall. This was the famous Madame He Chi in the netherworld. The female official, Fei Feng, quickly led Lu Ben in. Lu Ben walked to the hall and knelt down. He did not dare to raise his head and reported the results of the inspection in detail. After listening to him expressionlessly, Madame He Chi raised her hand, and Fei Feng quickly led Lu Ben out. From the beginning to the end, Madame He Chi didn't say a word to Lu Ben. In the cornucopia, Yu Qianzhou's stall had been open for a whole day. Except for Yan Zhuixing, no one asked about it. Ziyi waited excitedly for a long time, but as she waited, she became listless. She did not have the patience to do this business that had no customers anymore. In the end, she pulled Furong and ran back. After a whole day, Yu Qianzhou knew that there was no point in continuing to set up the stall. With such a high price, it was estimated that no one would buy it anymore. What made him suspicious was that it was Yan Zhuixing and his men who bought a large amount of 7-star blood orchids from the treasure tower. He packed up the stall and returned to the Wen family's shop. Nongzhu called him up from the window on the top floor. With a dark face, Yu Qianzhou turned a deaf ear and went back to his room. Sometimes, when you were unhappy, you needed to show it and let others know that you were unhappy. Otherwise, others would easily make you unhappy again in the future. The three people on the top floor looked at each other. When Lanfeng smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that he is still angry. He is giving us a hard time. This guy has a problem. I will go and have a look." Nongzhu swaggered down the stairs. Ziyi and Furong were in the room and continued to fiddle with the things they bought. When Yu Qianzhou came in and looked at the room that had almost become a warehouse, he said to Ziyi with a dark face, "Go back to your room." Ziyi naturally wanted to oppose him, but when she saw that Yu Qianzhou seemed to be really unhappy, he stuck out his bright red tongue at Furong, threw away the things in his hands and quickly left. Furong looked at Yu Qianzhou weakly and said, "Are you unhappy? Did I make you angry?" Yu Qianzhou turned around and bolted the door and window. With a dark face, he nodded and said, "Yes, you made me unhappy." Furong immediately became nervous. She put down the things in her hands and whispered, "What did I do wrong? I will definitely change." "Well, you haven't let me touch you for a long time. This is your biggest mistake." Yu Qianzhou walked behind her and suddenly laughed. He put his arms around her waist and slid one of his hands directly into her collar. Furong immediately let out a cry of surprise. The couple rolled on the bed and made love. Nongzhu came down and met Ziyi, who was running away. They talked casually for a while. Ziyi told her that Yu Qianzhou was angry. Nongzhu waved her hand disapprovingly and asked Ziyi to go back first. She still swaggered to the door of Yu Qianzhou's room. She pushed the door but found it was bolted. When she was about to use her divine sense to have a look, Yu Qianzhou's roar suddenly came from inside, "Get out of my way! Don't ruin my plan." Then came the messy voice. Nongzhu was stunned and muttered awkwardly, "What bad luck." She slapped the door heavily and shouted, "When you are done, come up here. I have something to tell you." Then she turned around and went back. After returning upstairs, when Lanfeng saw that he looked strange and asked, "How is it?" "Wait a little longer. He is busy." Nongzhu could only say so. When Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing looked at each other and were curious about what Yu Qianzhou was busy with, they quickly released their divine sense to check downstairs. With their cultivation, this distance was really nothing. They were shocked when they saw it. Their divine sense shrank back as if they were escaping. When Lanfeng looked embarrassed and didn't say a word, Lu Yanqing bit her teeth behind the green veil and blushed. Fortunately, the green veil blocked it and others couldn't see it. No matter how high their cultivation was, it was not used to peep at others. Nongzhu looked at the slightly shocked reaction of the two and laughed like a thief. She said, "I can't help it. This guy is used to being shameless. He doesn't care about the occasion. It's not the first time I've met him. You just have to get used to it." They waited for a long time. When Yu Qianzhou came, he looked comfortable in the face of the three people who were a little unnatural. He asked as if nothing had happened, "What can I do for you three seniors?" Fortunately, Nongzhu was also thick-skinned. Seeing that he didn't care, she was even more unconcerned. She asked, "How many 7-star blood orchids do you have?" "What?" Yu Qianzhou asked with a vigilant face. "You want my things again?" Nongzhu's words blocked Nongzhu's words. These words made the three people a little embarrassed. Yes, it was true that they wanted his things again. As the person involved, Lu Yanqing said, "Yu Qianzhou, I want to buy a few 7-star blood orchids to study their medicinal properties, but your price is too high. I can't afford that much money. Can you make it cheaper?" She couldn't say it for free. Yu Qianzhou looked at her suspiciously. His eyes flashed and he said, "Senior Lu, the person who bought a lot of 7-star blood orchids in Treasure Tower?" Nongzhu and Wen Lanfeng also looked at Lu Yanqing when they heard this. The latter immediately shook her head and said, "You misunderstood. I didn't buy anything from Treasure Tower. I just thought of it when I saw you buying a lot." "I see." Yu Qianzhou thought for a moment and said, "When I sell things, I only increase the price. I never do anything like reduce the price." Otherwise I don't sell at all. As soon as these words came out, Wen Lanfeng's face didn't look good. Nongzhu immediately shouted, "You Qianshou, don't go too far. It's already a great honor for the master of Lingfang Valley to ask for your help. Don't get greedy for money." Chapter 641. Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes and said, "Why are you in such a hurry? Did I say I want money?" Ignoring Nongzhu's astonishment, he asked Lu Yanqing, "Senior Lu, how many do you need?" They were stunned by him. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were full of praise and he nodded slightly. Lu Yanqing said with some embarrassment, "How can I ask for your things for free? You use them to make money." Yu Qianshou waved his hand generously and said, "I didn't say I would give them to you for free." Wen Lanfeng and Nongzhu's faces darkened at the same time. Lu Yanqing was speechless. She felt embarrassed just now. It turned out that it was not for free. She asked in an unnatural tone, "What are your conditions?" Yu Qianshou ignored Wen Lanfeng and Nongzhu's murderous eyes and said, "Do me a favor. Help me take 2 people to your Lingfang Valley and temporarily protect their safety." Wen Lanfeng and Nongzhu were slightly stunned. Lu Yanqing asked curiously, "Which 2 people? You might as well tell me first. If it's suitable, I can promise you." "It's suitable. It's most suitable for them to go to your place because they are 2 women." Yu Qianshou smiled somewhat helplessly and said, "One of them is Yi Kun, who lives here. And the other one, Yan Yu, the proprietress of Sleeping Spring House. Help me take them away." Wen Lanfeng was finally relieved when he heard that it was 2 women. But he asked curiously, "Yi Kun is reasonable. What's the relationship between you and Yan Yu? Why do you want to take her away?" Yu Qianshou shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Niu Yud has something to do and left. I was entrusted by Niu Yud to protect her temporarily." "So that's it." Wen Lanfeng believed it. But Nongzhu and Lu Yanqing, who understood that Yu Qianshou was Niu Yud, looked at each other and knew what was going on. "Okay, I promise you." Lu Yanqing nodded. "Thank you, senior." Yu Qianshou thanked him first and then frowned, "But I'm worried that Yan Yu doesn't want to go. I'll have to trouble you to tell her that it's Niu Yud's idea. If she still doesn't want to go, you can take her away by force." "Take her away by force?" Lu Yanqing hesitated. "I know you may not want to do that." Yu Qianshou turned to look at Wen Lanfeng and said, "I wonder if Senior Wen can help me escort them to Spirit Fang Valley." Nongzhu was speechless. This guy really knows how to pick people. Wen Lanfeng is 100% willing to go to Lingfang Valley, let alone with such a high-sounding reason. Qianshou was a bit. "You is to say, you is, but he seems he is planning his funeral." Sure enough, Wen Lanfeng's eyes lit up, but he still found a way out of this embarrassing situation. He said with a smile, "It's not impossible for me to help you. The key is how many 7-star blood orchids you are willing to give me." "That's not a problem." Yu Qianshou waved his hand and asked Lu Yanqing, "Senior, how many do you want?" Lu Yanqing asked hesitantly, "How about 5? If you can't, I can give you less." She did want 5 stalks, but when she thought that 1 stalk was worth 200 million, 5 stalks would be 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. Compared to protecting 2 people, this price was too cheap for her. 10. Yu Qianshou didn't reply to Lu Yanqing, but he said to Wen Lanfeng, "What do you think about giving 10 7-star blood orchids to Senior Lu?" Lu Yanqing was a bit angry. It was her business. Why did he always bring Wen Lanfeng into it? Wen Lanfeng glanced at Lu Yanqing and said, "Don't ask me about it. You ask her." Nongzhu knew what they were thinking and immediately interrupted, "All right. All right. It's settled." "Good." Yu Qianshou readily agreed. He took out 10 pots of 7-star blood orchids from his storage bag on the spot and placed them on the ground. Lu Yanqing saw that things were like this and there was nothing to do. She put away the 10 pots of blood orchids. After the handover, Yu Qianshou said to Nongzhu, "You'd better take Furong and Ziyi back as soon as possible. It may not be peaceful here recently. Don't worry about me. I have a trump card to deal with it." Nongzhu laughed for a while and taught him a lesson. "You'd better take care of yourself. This time you made Hu Changshu lose face in front of all the heroes in the world. He will settle accounts with you sooner or later. Be careful." Seeing that he was so confident, Yu Qianshou was silent for a little and then said to the 3, "I won't bother you anymore. I have something to do. I have to go to the Ice Palace's shop." Nongzhu exclaimed, "What are you going to do there? The hatred of the second disciple of the Ice Palace has always been on your head. Do you want to die?" "Humph." Yu Qianshou said arrogantly, "Although his cultivation is high, I'm afraid it's not so easy to kill me." "Don't worry. He can't kill me. Then he turned around and left. Don't be so arrogant. Be careful. Nongzhu shouted from behind. In the main hall of the Dark Nether Palace, the noble and cold Lady Blackpool walked slowly in the hall with her long dress trailing behind her. Her eyes were flickering for a long time. Suddenly, she waved her sleeve and turned into a ball of black light. She flew out of the palace and directly flew to the highest peak protected by the 5 peaks. On the roof of the ancient, magnificent, sacred and mysterious Dark Nether Palace, a dozen people suddenly appeared. They stared at the black light in the sky and their expressions changed. They looked at each other and disappeared again without saying a word. The black light seemed to have found the right direction. It flashed toward the back palace of the Dark Nether Palace and directly shot toward a small building surrounded by the deep wood forest. Just as it was about to break through the door of the small building, a flash of silver lightning directly repelled the black light with a bang. The black light appeared and Lady Blackpool staggered back for a dozen steps. She didn't stop until she reached a tree trunk in the deep wood forest. Lady Blackpool frowned and yelled harshly, "Qianjun, how dare you attack me?" A silver light flashed in front of the building. A middle-aged man wearing silver armor, with long hair flying in the wind and stubble all over his face showed up. He stared at her indifferently and said, "Blackpool, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. Don't you know where this place is? You can't trespass without permission." Lady Blackpool gritted her teeth and said with resentment in her eyes, "I will go wherever I want. It's not up to you, a servant. Get out of my way. I want to see the Emperor of the Underworld." The middle-aged man called Qianjun said emotionlessly, "The Emperor of the Underworld is painting and can't be disturbed. I advise you to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise don't blame me, a servant, for kicking you out of the Dark Nether Palace." "You." Lady Blackpool didn't know what to say. She knew she was no match for Qianjun. She lifted her dress and knelt down in front of the building saying, "Blackpool is here to see the Emperor of the Underworld. I have something important to report." After a moment of silence, a nonchalant voice came out from the building, "Qianjun, let her in." His tone was gentle, making anyone who heard it feel comfortable in their heart. It was filled with a calmness that stood aloof from worldly affairs. "Yes." Qianjun bowed to the inside of the building. With a flash of silver light, he disappeared. Lady Blackpool stood up and glanced around with resentment in her eyes. She waved her hand to smooth the long tail of her dress. In the blink of an eye, she had become another noble lady. He slowly walked into the small building. The decorations in the building were elegant, without a trace of luxury. Instead, there were many ancient scrolls piled up. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, she wouldn't believe that the Emperor of the Underworld, who was famous in the Underworld, would live here. She might even think that this was the humble residence of a scholar. Lady Blackpool glanced over the scrolls piled up. A hint of disdain flashed in her eyes, but it soon disappeared. She walked up the wooden stairs to the attic. As soon as she climbed up the attic, she saw the back of a man in a thin white robe. Looking from the back, he looked like a scholar. He was writing in front of a writing desk. "Blackpool greets the Emperor of the Underworld." Lady Blackpool knelt down again. The scholar continued writing. He said without turning his head, "Blackpool, why do you need to see me so urgently?" He looked like a harmless scholar, but no one could imagine that he was the Emperor of the Underworld, the ruler of the Underworld. Madame Heichi stood up and complained, "Emperor of the Underworld, why don't you control your subordinates? They even dared to attack me. What will happen to them in the future? They won't even take the Emperor of the Underworld seriously." The scholar let out a non-committal laugh and said, "I don't want to manage anything anymore. That's why I've delegated the authority to you guys. If you guys really don't want to, I can consider managing things again. That way you guys can have peace and quiet." Lady Blackpool's expression changed. She said with a smile, "The Emperor of the Underworld is happy and angry." It was Blackpool who didn't know his place and shouldn't have quarreled with Qianjun. The Emperor of the Underworld has worked hard for the Underworld for many years. As his subordinates, we should share the burden of the Emperor of the Underworld. We shouldn't have any complaints. "I'm relieved to hear that." The scholar didn't stop writing. He dipped his brush into the ink and asked, "Why do you need to see me so urgently?" "Here's the thing. A few days ago, I sent someone to check the underworld passages of the 72 worlds in the human world. They found that the gate to the underworld in one of the worlds was damaged, and a knocker was stolen." Lady Blackpool said angrily, "I didn't expect someone to be so daring. He even dared to damage the gate to the underworld. The people in the human world are getting more and more daring." They obviously don't take the Emperor of the Underworld seriously. Blackpool asked the Emperor of the Underworld to send someone to punish them. The scholar unhappily snorted. The brush in his hand stopped as he coldly said, "Hey Chi, how dare you to ignore my words? Did you forget my warning? Without my permission, no one from the Underworld can intrude the human world." The Emperor of the Underworld is angry. The Emperor of the Underworld is angry. Lady Blackpool knelt down again with a frightened expression. She explained, Blackpool didn't let anyone intrude the human world. He just sent someone to check the passage to the Underworld. Blackpool has no selfish motives. He did it for the sake of the Underworld. That's why he sent 2 servants from the Underworld Royal Palace to carry it out. I believe they wouldn't dare to disobey the order of the Emperor of the Underworld. Remember, the human world is the foundation of the Underworld. Without my permission, no one is allowed to intrude and disturb the order of the human world. Having said that, the scholar continued writing and said, "It seems that your prestige is getting higher and higher. You can even command the servants of the Underworld Royal Palace." Chapter 642. Though he said it casually, every word was sharp and penetrating. Madame Blackpool was frightened, not knowing if the Underworld Emperor was just saying it casually or if he meant it. She forced herself to smile embarrassedly. Blackpool knows his own limitations. Without the Underworld Emperor's favor, I wouldn't be where I am today. It's good that you understand. The scholar raised his hand and said with his back facing her, "You can leave now if you have nothing else to say." Blackpool hadn't achieved her goal yet, so she wouldn't leave willingly. She gritted her teeth and pulled off the black silk tied around her waist. She shook her shoulders slightly, and the black gauze on her royal dress slid off her shoulders, exposing her snow-white and plump body to the air. Madame Blackpool stood up slowly and walked out from the pile of black gauze, walking to the back of the scholar. She wrapped her arms around the scholar's waist and said while twisting her body, "Blackpool hasn't served the Underworld Emperor for a long time." "Wait a moment. As you wish." The scholar chuckled. His hand didn't stop moving. Madame Blackpool uttered a happily. She tilted her head to look at the painting scroll on the desk that was about to be completed. Her pupils shrank after a quick glance. A magnificent colorful painting scroll unfolded in front of her eyes. An earth-shattering battle scene was vividly depicted on the paper. The bloody, tragic and exciting battle was depicted with the tip of the scholar's brush. Countless experts from both the immortal realm and the netherworld surrounded one person, and the person who was surrounded in the picture scroll was full of heroic spirit. He was like a god of slaughter, riding a vigorous red divine dragon into the sky and into the ground, controlling tens of thousands of golden rays as if he was invincible. Countless people were killed by him, turning into a rain of blood. In the painting, a man in white armor and a man in a golden robe had a terrifyingly high cultivation state. They were entangled with the man riding the dragon. When Madame Blackpool saw the man in white armor, her naked body stiffened a bit. She knew 6 of the 12 armored warriors behind the man in white armor. One of them was the silver-armored warrior who had defeated her in front of the small building. The man in white armor who was fighting shoulder to shoulder with the man in a golden robe was the Underworld Emperor himself. Isn't this the Underworld Emperor? Madame Blackpool stiffly reached out a white arm and pointed at the white-armored man who was fighting fiercely. The scholar replied with a non-committal, His brows were solemn and his brush did not stop moving. His strokes were fine to the point that the slightest detail could be seen, vividly reflecting the intense battle atmosphere in the painting. After a while he finally completed a section of the scroll. He exhaled softly and put the brush in his hand aside. He examined the painting with a grave expression and said, "For so many years, this scene has been haunting my mind, and I can't get it out of my head. I might as well draw it so that people in the future will know about it. After all, not many people know about it anymore." He seems to be interested now. He looks back at Lady Blackpool's seductive body and raises his hand to touch her plump breasts. But Madame Blackpool seemed to be attracted by the content of the scroll. She pointed at the 12 armored warriors and asked, "Are these the 12 legendary underworld generals?" The scholar nodded slightly and said, "That's right. Unfortunately, 6 of my 12 beloved generals died in that battle. Among the remaining 6, black armor died in the war. The army of the dark underworld that you took over is his former subordinate. Now only the silver armor warrior and the other 4 are left. Silver armor warrior is my personal guard, and he has been guarding the underworld royal palace. The other 4 are the masters of the other 4 palaces on the underworld Emperor Mountain. They are my brothers who have followed me to conquer the world. So I have to warn you. Don't ever let me hear you call them slaves again. Otherwise, I don't mind destroying your cultivation and sending you to the endless dark sea to be a laborer." Blackpool shuddered. No wonder these 5 guys always looked down on her. They were the 12 legendary underworld generals of the underworld. But so what? The legend would be replaced one day. Blackpool, I know I was wrong. I didn't expect them to be the 12 underworld generals who follow the emperor of the underworld. I thought the 12 underworld generals had died a long time ago. Madame Blackpool twisted her body in the scholar's arms. She said in a wrong tone, "They know I am your woman, but they still don't treat me nicely. It is obvious that they don't respect you, underworld emperor." The scholar caressed her smooth buttocks and laughed. "Ignorance is not a crime. I won't pursue the past. Also, they have followed me for many years. Even if they didn't contribute much, they still worked hard. You are too young to show off your status in front of them. You should endure it. It is only a matter of face. You won't lose anything. I will listen to the emperor of the underworld." Lady Blackpool's naked body wriggled again. She pointed at the man in the golden robe who fought alongside the emperor of the underworld and asked, "Who is he? How can he have such a terrifying cultivation?" "Jianghu of the immortal realm. He is the immortal emperor you speak of. His name is Jianghu." The scholar smiled. "Immortal emperor?" Blackpool couldn't help but exclaim. She pointed at the man riding the dragon and asked, "Who is he? How come he forced the emperor of the underworld and the immortal emperor to fight together?" She looked at the others who were attacking the man. She didn't finish her sentence because she didn't want to embarrass the emperor of the underworld. The scholar gazed at the man riding the dragon on the scroll with a solemn expression. He said slowly, "He came from a place that was sealed by Jianghu and me. I still don't know how he got out of the place. I don't know his name. I have never heard of him in that place. He called himself the Myriad Swords Demonic Monarch, and his cultivation state is very high. What happened next? Where is that sealed place?" Madame Blackpool asked curiously. "Pa." The scholar slapped her buttocks forcefully with one hand and pinched her chin with the other, saying, "Didn't you say you would serve me? Why do you care so much?" Lady Blackpool was bewildered. Then she undressed the scholar with a flower-like smile. The two of them fell down on the ground. Amorous feelings immediately overflowed in the small building. Madame Blackpool tried her best to flatter the scholar and tried her best to please him. After a while, the two of them hugged each other. Lady Blackpool leaned on the scholar and complained, "You asked me to maintain the order of the underworld, but the gate to the underworld has been damaged. If I don't do anything, how will the people think of me?" "What are you trying to say?" the scholar asked carelessly. "At least you should take back the ring that was stolen," Lady Blackpool said. The scholar's eyes turned cold. He glanced at her and said, "I heard that you are still longing for the blue sky, the green water, the singing birds, the fragrant flowers, the sun, the moon, and the stars in the human world. It seems like the rumor is true. However, this was also human nature. She was a woman after all. Women like the feasting and bustling life and can't stand the endless darkness of the underworld." "Emperor of the underworld, you misunderstood me. I don't know who is framing me." Lady Blackpool wiggled her body and said in a spoiled manner, "If we don't do anything and don't pursue this matter, someone might destroy the gate to the underworld in the future. It seems like you don't understand what I mean." The scholar humphed, "I'm warning you, the cycle of the heavenly Tao has its own destiny. Even immortal Emperor Jianghu and I can't get rid of this restriction. If you really want to get rid of this restriction, don't even think about it unless you become a god. Otherwise, you will bring a great disaster to yourself in the underworld." "Become a god?" Lady Blackpool was startled and flattered. "Emperor of the underworld, aren't you the god of the underworld? Who dares to restrict you? If nothing can restrict me, why would I hide in the endless darkness for so many years? There are some things that you won't understand until you reach that level." The scholar stared at the ceiling and sighed, "There is something called the cycle of the heavenly Tao. For example, the demon realm." "Demon realm?" Lady Blackpool propped up her naked upper body and asked, "Is it the demonic Tao that was rampant in the ancient times?" The scholar nodded, "Yes. You won't understand how arrogant the demon realm was if you haven't experienced it yourself, but I know it clearly. The demon realm almost suppressed the immortal realm and the underworld. But what about the retribution? The demon realm was sealed, and the demon children and grandsons who stayed in the other realms were massacred and paid a heavy price. Is the demon realm the place where you and Immortal Emperor sealed?" Lady Blackpool asked. The scholar didn't say yes or no. He continued, back then Jean Tai and I didn't realize the cycle of the heavenly Tao. Later, because of the appearance of a pearl in the human world, the immortal realm and the underworld fought in the human world. The souls of countless living beings in the human world were destroyed, and they didn't even have the chance to reincarnate. This was the result of retribution. At that time Jean Tai and I were blinded by greed and didn't realize this. Lady Blackpool's eyes flashed as she carefully asked, "What kind of pearl could tempt you, an immortal emperor?" The scholar ignored her and continued to murmur as if he was recalling an unforgettable past. No one expected the retribution to come so fast. At this time, that Thousand Swords demon monarch came out of nowhere and killed people in the immortal realm and the underworld in the name of enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. Without a choice, Jean Tai and I joined forces again to protect ourselves, but we were still no match for him. We were almost trapped by a grand formation he set up. Luckily we escaped quickly. Luckily the Thousand Swords demon monarch was too arrogant and fell into Jean Tai's trap. He was severely wounded and finally fell into our hands. Lady Blackpool was fascinated by the story. She didn't think that there was someone that the Emperor of Hell and Immortal Emperor couldn't defeat. How powerful was this person? However, after the Thousand Swords demon monarch fell, the pearl suddenly disappeared without a trace. We couldn't find it no matter how hard we tried. It was as if it was just a dramatic farce, like a dream or a dream. After waking up from the dream, Jean Tai and I looked back at the devastated human world and were shocked. We didn't know how many living beings were killed by this farce. At this time the heavenly Tao warned us. The entire human world was covered in dark clouds. Countless powerful golden thunderbolts struck and chased after Jean Tai and me. Fortunately, the two of us managed to escape and return. Chapter 643. After that incident, Jean Tai and I realized that there is an irresistible force maintaining the balance in the world. It is invisible and untouchable. No matter who it is, the demon realm, the immortal realm, the underworld, or the human world, once they break the balance they will be severely punished. The scholar looked solemn. Madame Blackpool felt her hair standing on end when she heard this. She looked out of the window and smiled unnaturally. "Don't worry, Emperor of Netherworld. It has been a long time. Everything is fine now." Fine. Who knows? Maybe it is the preparation of the final score. Once it explodes, I don't know what the consequences will be. The scholar sighed. The Great War in the human world almost killed all the living beings in the human world. It caused such a terrible consequence. It is not something that can be easily forgotten. The demon realm did evil, so Jean Tai and I punished it severely. When Jean Tai and I committed evil deeds, the Myriad Swords demon monarch came to punish us. Fortunately, the two of us managed to escape. Then the golden thunder fell from the sky, but we dodged it again. Madame Blackpool giggled. "Isn't it good? It means that Emperor of Netherworld is powerful enough to resist the unknown force. It can't do anything to you." "You can't say it like that. I don't want it to happen again and again. I don't want it to happen again. I hope it will be over. If there is a third time, I am afraid that the punishment will be more severe after such a long time. It won't give us any chance to escape. Maybe both the immortal realm and the underworld realm will pay the unforgivable price for their evil deeds in the human world." The scholar suddenly smiled bitterly. "I am a bit curious. If there is a final punishment, who will be the one to administer the punishment on behalf of the heaven? Will there really be a person who will administer the punishment on behalf of the heaven?" Madame Blackpool asked weakly. His eyes flickered as he thought about how he had always wanted to replace a certain someone. He faintly suspected that he would be the one to administer punishment on behalf of the heavens. Once this thought appeared, it was like a seed that began to sprout in his mind. No one can be sure. It is just a hunch. The scholar pushed her away and stood up naked. Madame Blackpool quickly got up and helped him put on his clothes. Then she put on her clothes too. The scholar looked at her and said, "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that you shouldn't think that the mortals in the human world are easy to bully. There is a pair of eyes in the unseen world that can see everything. Since you've already been born in the netherworld, you're a person of the netherworld. Don't think about the prosperity of the world anymore. No one can get everything they want. I can't, Kim can't, and you can't either." After saying this, the scholar walked to the desk, picked up the brush again, dipped it in ink, and continued with the next part of the scroll. "Do you really think that I, Blackpool, am a 3-year-old kid? You can fool me with some nonsense." The Madam of Blackpool didn't think so, but she replied, "Blackpool will remember the Emperor of the Underworld's teachings. But what about the knocker that was stolen from the Underworld gate? Are we really going to let the gate to the Underworld break and just stand there like that? What else can we do? The scholar continued, "The gate of the netherworld has existed since ancient times. I don't know who built it, but the materials used to forge it are extremely strange. Even I don't know what they are. It's easy to break them but difficult to merge them. Once they are separated, it will be difficult to merge them again. It's said that one has to use the three true fire to forge it. But the people who know how to use the three true fire have disappeared. What else can we do? Since it's such a precious item, we can't lose it," said the Madam of Blackpool. "Oh, you can tell me what you think?" the scholar asked. She waited for a while, but the scholar didn't respond. She stopped writing and turned around. "Just tell me what you want to say. Please forgive me." The Madam of Blackpool braced herself and said, "We can send someone out to find the lost item. Emperor of the Underworld, please don't misunderstand me. I have no intention of disturbing the order of the human world. Think about it. A person who has the ability to break into the gate to the underworld must not be an ordinary mortal. The person who dared to steal the item from the gate to the underworld must have a purpose. Otherwise, who would do such a thing? What if someone uses the lost knocker to forge a treasure that will bring harm to the human world? If we ignore it, what is the difference between that and disturbing the order of the human world?" The scholar seemed to change his expression. He asked with furrowed brows, "Can we find it?" "We can try. If we can't find it, then forget it." Madam of Blackpool bowed and said, "If the Emperor of the Underworld agrees, I will send someone out to investigate in secret. Whether we can find it or not, we won't disturb the order of the human world." The scholar paused for a while and turned around to continue writing, saying, "Just this once. No matter what the result is, there is no second time. If there is a second time, you don't have to serve me anymore. Go to the boundless dark cliff and serve those laborers." This was considered as an agreement. The Madam of Blackpool was delighted. "Blackpool obeys your order. I agreed to let you send someone out, but I didn't agree to let you go in person," the scholar said coldly. Madam of Blackpool's joy instantly vanished. She had tried so hard to go to the human world because she had stayed in the dim netherworld for too long. Outsiders couldn't understand how comfortable a beautiful woman like her was living in the human world. A woman's vanity couldn't be satisfied by a high cultivation state. Even if a group of men who looked like pigs were circling around her, looking at her lustfully every day, wishing they could take off her clothes, throw her on the bed and press her down, those evasive gazes could still satisfy her heart. But in this place, nobody dared to have any improper thoughts about her. They didn't even look at her lustfully, let alone say those vulgar flattering words. Nobody dared to do that because she was the woman of the Underworld Emperor. But then again, if it weren't for her beauty, the Underworld Emperor wouldn't have liked her at first sight and given her so many opportunities. Some women were used to those extravagant occasions, so it was hard for them to calm down and live a boring life day after day. One more day would make them restless. Those kinds of occasions were a fatal temptation for them. Even though she had died on such occasions in her previous life, she had finally created a chance to get some fresh air, but it was denied by the scholar's order. Madame Heiqi's heart was filled with irrepressible anger, but she didn't dare to show it. She bowed and said, "As the Underworld Emperor wishes, Heiqi will leave now." The scholar hummed without turning his head. Heiqi also lost interest in staying. He walked down the small building quietly and turned into a beam of black light as he fled to the door. The brush on the painting stopped and was put aside. The scholar's face showed the imposing manner of a person who had been in a superior position for a long time. This kind of indifferent attitude was like the Underworld Emperor who had awed the underworld. He called lightly, "Qian Jun." A beam of silver light flashed in from outside the window. A silver-armored man with long hair appeared. He cupped his hands and greeted with an imposing manner, "Underworld Emperor. What has this stupid woman been doing recently?" The Underworld Emperor clasped his hands behind his back and asked. Qian Jun immediately reported, "Recently she has been in frequent contact with the people of the immortal world. She has also been commanding the army of Dark Underworld to suppress the underworld overlords who are ready to make trouble. In addition, she has recruited some handsome male servants. Other than that, she has been meddling in the affairs of the Underworld Royal Palace, including dispatching people from the Underworld Royal Palace to patrol the underworld ways of the 72 worlds. Should we restrict her?" "Don't restrict her. Let her do as she pleases. I don't think she dares to overdo it. Otherwise, I will let her know what is worse than death," the Underworld Emperor snorted coldly. Qian Jun walked to his side and glanced at the painting on the desk, saying with furrowed brows, "Emperor of the Underworld, the power of the army of the Dark Underworld has grown very fast. Some of the older members have been purged and replaced by her trusted followers. Moreover, they have been slaughtering in the underworld, which has already made people panic. The mention of the army of dark underworld has changed their expressions. Are we going to let her continue to cause trouble? What's wrong with that? Many experts have emerged in the underworld these years. All of them are restless. Let her suppress them and get rid of those troublemakers. As the underworld emperor said this, he patted the bulging silver shoulder guard on Chen Jun's shoulder, sighing emotionally, only a few of our brothers are left. We have to preserve our strength to deal with possible crises. This kind of small fight is not worth your time. We can't let you guys fail miserably. Since the death of the Black Armor Destroyer, I've had this idea. That's why I found this stupid woman. Let her cause trouble. Ehe. So that's how it is. I thought you were bewitched by her beauty. Chen Jun said with a smile as he touched the painting on the desk. The other brothers are full of anger, and they even want to kill that woman to wake you up. It seems that I have to inform them in advance. Even though I know I have to tell them to keep acting like this and keep losing their temper. Don't be courteous to her. Although this woman is stupid, she is not stupid. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen her to do this. Don't let her suspect anything, the Underworld Emperor said with a smile while looking outside the window. Life in the underworld is indeed a bit lonely. It's not a bad thing to have such a beautiful woman bewitching me. At least she makes me feel comfortable. Chen Jun, do you think I'm right? Hee hee. Chen Jun laughed heartily. He touched the 12 armored underworld generals on the painting, a hint of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. He took a deep breath and said, Underworld Emperor, do you have any other orders? I'll go find them if there's nothing else. You should have heard what I said to her. The Underworld Emperor's eyes suddenly grew deep as he said, You have experienced what happened in the human world back then. Keep an eye on that stupid woman. Don't let her do anything stupid. If the heavenly punishment comes, none of us will be able to withstand it. I'll forget about the last time she sent someone out without my permission. If she dares do it behind my back again, it's useless to keep her alive. You destroy her cultivation and throw her to the endless dark sea. You don't need to report to me in advance. Yes, Underworld Emperor. Chen Jun cupped his hands and turned into a silvery light, disappearing outside the window. Chapter 644. A figure flew above the cornucopia and was stopped by more than a dozen figures when he flew to the Di-Rong Nation's Ice Palace shop. Yu Qianqiu showed a baffled expression and asked, Why are you stopping me? Mu Lianqiu, who was leading the law enforcement team, gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, The cornucopia doesn't allow cultivators below the soul formation stage to fly, especially during the cornucopia meeting. Yu Qianqiu, don't tell me you don't know this rule. Bullsh T rule. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart, but he said in surprise, There's such a rule? I really don't know. Mu Lianqiu's expression was dark and gloomy. He stared at Yu Qianqiu in silence for a while before saying slowly, I hope there won't be a next time. Definitely, definitely. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. Mu Lianqiu waved his hand and the dozen people quickly flew back. Yan Zhuixing was already standing in the backyard of the Ice Palace shop after hearing the news. He stared at Yu Qianqiu in the air with a smile and said, Brother Yu, welcome. Please come down quickly for a chat. Yu Qianqiu landed and cupped his hands. How would I dare not come when Brother Yan invited me? The two of them looked at each other and laughed. They were polite, but they each had their own ulterior motives. None of them were good people. Yan Zhuixing looked at the sky and said, Brother Yu is a hero no matter where he goes. Yan Zhuixing is really envious that you don't even care about the rules of the cornucopia. It's fine if you don't abide by this kind of rule that only benefits a few people, Yu Qianqiu said sarcastically. Even if I abide by it, no one will say anything good about me. Ah, Brother Yu is indeed honest. Yan Zhuixing nodded and praised him. I don't have any good points, but I like to speak the truth. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand without a care in the world and sternly said, Brother Yan, let's not beat around the bush. Are you buying the 7-star blood orchid or not? It's not convenient to talk here, right? Yan Zhuixing looked around and raised his hand, Please come upstairs. Yu Qianqiu glanced upstairs and knew that similar buildings had a soundproof formation. He touched his chin and said, Is there an ambush waiting for me? Yan Zhuixing smiled and said, Brother Yu has Senior Wen's support. Why should I be afraid? Please. The two of them acted like old friends, smiling side by side as they went upstairs. Just as Yan Zhuixing pushed open a door, he suddenly heard a shrill scream coming from upstairs. Both of them were shocked, especially Yu Qianqiu, who quickly put up his guard. Yan Zhuixing's expression changed. He couldn't be bothered with him anymore and rushed upstairs. What the hell? Could it be a trap? Yu Qianqiu was confused. He was worried that it was a trap, but he couldn't help but rush upstairs. When he reached the top floor, he found the room where the scream came from and carefully pushed the door open. Bing Qingzi, Man Hu, and Yan Zhuixing were staring at a disciple who was rolling on the ground. The three of them looked at Yu Qianqiu who came in, but no one cared about him at this moment. There were two other disciples beside him who seemed to be panicking. Yu Qianqiu plucked up his courage and walked to Yan Zhuixing's side. The disciple rolling on the ground was emitting green smoke as if he was burning. Wrinkles gradually appeared on his face and he was aging at a visible speed. Yu Qianqiu was secretly shocked. He couldn't help asking in a low voice, "Brother Yan, what's going on? Could it be that your ice palace is enforcing some sect rules and punishing disciples?" Yan Zhuixing shook his head slightly and said solemnly, "It's the 7 treasure pills sold by the World Chamber of Commerce. There's something wrong with it." Yu Qianqiu was dazed. He knew what the problem was, so he quickly shut his mouth and pretended that he knew nothing. All of a sudden, a huge and threatening aura spread out, forcing them to take a few steps back. The temperature in the room dropped rapidly, making them feel like they were in a world of ice and snow. Bing Qingzi waved his sleeve, and the disciple rolling on the ground floated up into the air. Bing Qingzi's fingers were like the wind, shooting dozens of white light into the important acupoints of the disciple. Then he pushed out a white mist from his palm and wrapped the disciple up. Apparently he was treating the disciple. However, to everyone's surprise, the disciple's screams seemed to be even more painful. It was sharp and ear-piercing as if he was being cut into pieces. Bing Qingzi's face was shocked. The white mist quickly retracted, and the disciple slowly landed on the ground, twitching and rolling on the ground. Everyone looked at each other in shock. What a powerful poison. It can even burn Zhen Yuan. Bing Qingzi was shocked. He immediately turned around and stared at Man Hu, shouting, "What the hell is going on?" Man Hu was at a loss and said in panic, "Master, I also don't know what's going on. After I bought the elixir from the treasure tower, I came back directly." Bing Qingzi teleported to the side of the other two disciples. He grabbed their wrists and examined them. After a while, he loosened his grip and stared at Man Hu coldly. "It's the same 7 treasure elixir. Why are they fine?" When the two disciples heard that they were fine, the fear on their faces turned into relief. "Master, I really don't know what's going on." Man Hu's face turned bitter. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two and found that one had just reached the core formation stage, and the other had just reached the nascent soul stage. He knew what was going on. He couldn't see the cultivation of the person on the ground, but he must have used the 7 treasure elixir to break through to the tribulation stage. Yan Zhuixing took a step forward and said with a frown, "Eldest senior brother, did you meet anyone on the way here? Could you have been replaced?" "I didn't." Man Hu recalled and said, "I know that many people covet this thing. Moreover, our ice palace got the biggest share and bought 100 of them. After I got it, I didn't stay any longer and came back directly. At most, I met someone I knew on the way and nodded to say hello. Moreover, the elixir was in the storage pouch and never left it. It's impossible for it to have been replaced." Yan Zhuixing looked at Bing Qingzi, whose eyes were flickering, and said, "That's strange. Eldest senior brother definitely wouldn't harm a fellow disciple. However, it's reasonable to say that the World Commerce Association wouldn't sell poison. Otherwise, they would be going against the whole world. No matter how powerful the World Commerce Association is, they would still be courting death. Yin Baikong wouldn't do such a stupid thing." He stared at the disciple on the ground and said, "Could it be that he was poisoned before this? Otherwise, why are they fine and only he is?" Yu Qianqiu listened to his logical analysis and was speechless. At this moment, the disciple on the ground also stopped. In just a short while, he had become an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He was unreasonably skinny and looked haggard. He stretched out his hand towards Bing Qingzi, but unfortunately he couldn't move. With 2 lines of tears on his face, he said in a hoarse voice, "Ancestor, ancestor, save me." Bing Qingzi walked over with an ashen face and squatted down to check his body. After a long time he stood up and sighed. He's fine now. However, his dantian is severely damaged. He can no longer cultivate in this lifetime. You two carry him away and take good care of him. The last sentence was said to the 2 disciples beside him. The 2 disciples didn't dare to hesitate and carefully carried the person away. Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. He really couldn't tell that Bing Qingzi treated his disciples so well. However, he felt that it was a little strange. Logically speaking, those who took the fake limit-breaking pill should be dead after breaking through to the tribulation passing stage. Could it be that Qin Feng's alchemy skills were not up to par and the medicinal effect was discounted? What he didn't know was that cultivators who used the fake limit-breaking pill to break through to the tribulation passing stage would indeed be poisoned to death. However, it was also related to the amount taken. Only when the poison accumulated would it be able to kill a person. As for the disciple just now, he had only consumed a pseudo-restriction breaking pill, so he was half dead. In fact, Qin Feng's alchemy skills were already strong enough. How could an alchemist who could refine a pill with pill halo be weak? Master. Man who walked in front of Bing Qingzi and didn't know what to say. Bing Qingzi coldly glanced at Yu Qianzhou and muttered, "There is still no conclusion to this matter and it needs to be investigated. I will go and see if the others have the same reaction." With that, he disappeared. As soon as Bing Qingzi left, Yu Qianzhou felt the pressure was greatly reduced. He became lively and said, "I say, State Preceptor Man Who, why did you come here to join in the fun instead of being a State Preceptor? Look at what happened now. You almost killed someone. Fortunately, you didn't kill anyone or else you would have committed a great sin." You. Man Who angrily said, "Yu Qianzhou, don't be hypocritical here. Haven't you killed a lot of people?" "Do I need to be hypocritical? I admit that I have killed a lot of people. Maybe I will kill even more people." "That's not right." Yu Qianzhou suddenly said suspiciously, "Listening to what you said, could it be that you want to kill that disciple just now?" Man Who almost choked to death. How could this label be randomly put on him? He immediately flew into a rage and said, "I want to kill you. Are you trying to scare me?" Yu Qianzhou raised his sleeves and sneered, "Why don't you give it a try and see who will kill who? Brother Yu, what you are doing is a bit unkind. You are rubbing salt on the wound." After Yan Zhuixing warned Yu Qianzhou, he immediately pulled back the rioting Man Who and comforted him. "Eldest senior brother, don't worry. Master and I both believe in you." Yu Qianzhou laughed and waved his hand, "Take it as me talking too much. Anyway, it has nothing to do with me. I say, Brother Yin, are you going to buy the 7-star blood orchid or not? If not, I will leave." "Buy, of course I will buy." Yan Zhuixing pressed on Man Who's shoulder, indicating him to restrain himself. Then he turned around and asked, "I wonder how many 7-star blood orchids Brother Yu has?" "You don't have to worry about this as long as you can afford it." Yu Qianzhou touched his nose and asked, "Brother Yin, I have a question but I don't know if it is convenient for me to answer it. What do you want so many 7-star blood orchids for?" He knew that it was useless to ask, but he still couldn't help but want to ask. "Sure enough," Yan Zhuixing said perfunctorily, "we naturally have our use. Brother Yu doesn't have to worry about this." Yu Qianzhou looked him up and down and said with a smile, "I heard that Brother Yin has a unique martial art. Is it related to the martial art that you are practicing to buy so many blood orchids?" Chapter 645. Yan Zhuixing's eyes were slightly cold and he said in a deep voice, "Brother Yu, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. This matter has been proven to be false. It's better not to mention hearsay again so as to avoid misunderstanding. This matter has become a big deal. I'm just curious, so I asked casually." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand disapprovingly and then asked, "I wonder how many blood orchids Brother Yen wants to buy?" When it came to business, Yan Zhuixing didn't care about him anymore. He said sternly, "It depends on whether Brother you can take care of the price. If it's cheap, buy more. If it's expensive, buy less. Since Brother Yen has spoken, for the sake of old friends, I will naturally take care of the price." Yu Qianzhou touched his chin and thought for a while. "The original price is 200 million upper-grade spiritual stones. If Brother Yen sincerely wants to buy, each one can be cheaper by 1,000 upper-grade spiritual stones." Man Who snorted on the spot, "Something worth 1 billion is cheaper by 1,000. How can you say that?" Yan Zhuixing pressed his hand to him and said with a fake smile, "Brother Yu really thinks highly of me. I'm indebted to you for taking care of me. To make a long story short, I want 7 blood orchids. I wonder if Brother Yu has brought them?" Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, 7 blood orchids are worth 1 billion upper-grade spiritual stones. Does Brother Yen bring enough money?" Yan Zhuixing knew that this guy was a sticky candy, and it was meaningless to continue. So, he took out 2 storage bags and handed them to him generously. Yu Qianzhou took them and checked the scene. After counting them, there were indeed 1 billion upper-grade spiritual stones. It seemed that the other party had already prepared to buy 7. After putting away the storage bags, he fiddled around for a while before returning another storage bag. Here are 7,000 upper-grade spirit stones. You can count them. Yan Zhuoxing didn't think it was too little. He took the bag and put it away without looking at it. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and placed 7 pots of blood orchids on the ground, saying, 7 pots of blood orchids, please inspect the goods, Brother Yan. The moment the 7 pots of blood orchids were placed out, Yan Zhuoxing's eyes turned as cold as the stars and killing intent surged. Man Hu immediately shouted, Yu Qianqiu, are you playing with us? Great Imperial Advisor Man Hu, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the 7 pots of blood orchids on the ground and said in surprise, these are genuine 7-star blood orchids. Don't you know what they are? The 7-star blood orchid on the ground seemed to have no eyes. Dozens of slender leaves grew out of it like a pile of weeds. If it wasn't for its blood-red color and the faint smell of blood, it would be very difficult to associate it with the 7-star blood orchid. The most disgusting thing was that there was not even a shadow of an orchid. To be exact, it wasn't that he couldn't see it, but that it hadn't grown at all. Compared with the ones he sold at the stall before, it was completely a blood orchid seedling. Yan Zhuoxing stared at the blood orchid on the ground and said indifferently, the 7-star blood orchid seedling has 10 leaves. After that, it grows 1 leaf every year. After 100 years, it blossoms and bears fruit. After another 100 years, the fruit ripens and falls. These 7 pots of blood orchid are at most 30 years old. It's too different from the century-old blood orchid that Brother Yu sold before. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with cold eyes and said, Brother Yu, aren't you going too far by doing this? Brother Yan, don't misunderstand. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand repeatedly and explained, the 10 pots of blood orchid that you saw before have been bought by someone. The rest of the goods are really not good, but these 7 pots are already considered good among the remaining ones. If Brother Yan is not satisfied, you can return it. I will never say no. He didn't sincerely sell the blood orchid to Yan Zhuoxing at all. This time he came purely to see if Yan Zhuoxing would buy it. Therefore he made a few pots of inferior goods. It was fine if the other party didn't buy it, but he couldn't give the other party good things. He wasn't the kind of person who would leave trouble in the future just to make money. He just wanted to find an excuse to make the sale fail. Man Hu sneered, full of nonsense. I don't think you are sincere at all. There's no need to return it. Yan Zhuoxing put away all the 7 pots of blood orchid. Man Hu immediately transmitted his voice, 8th junior brother, what are you doing? This blood orchid hasn't grown at all. Before he finished speaking, he heard Yan Zhuoxing's voice transmission, eldest senior brother, you also know that this guy has no sincerity to sell to us. But I'm not a fool. There is a secret method in the demonic book to accelerate the blood orchid's ripening. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He didn't expect the other party to buy it even though he deliberately made things difficult for them. He faintly felt that something was wrong. He couldn't help but smile. Brother Yan, you make me feel embarrassed. How about this? I'm also an honest person. I can't bear to see others suffer losses. You can return it first. I will definitely find you 7 pots of mature blood orchid within 3 days. Once he cheated the blood orchid back into his hands, there would be many reasons not to sell it in the future. Yan Zhuoxing smiled faintly, that's too troublesome. If you really feel embarrassed, you might as well return the spirit stones to me. What do you mean? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Look at my eyes and you will understand. The faint smile on Yan Zhuoxing's face turned indifferent. He said word by word, magic eye ecstasy. Yu Qianqiu was confused by him. He didn't know what he was talking about, so he looked at his eyes subconsciously. Suddenly, the other party's cold eyes instantly turned blood red. It was extremely demonic and dazzling. The red light flashed and pierced one's heart. There was a boom in his head. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that something was wrong. He wanted to look away, but he realized that he wasn't listening to his commands. His consciousness instantly blurred. When he came back to his senses, he realized that he was in a sea of blood. His limbs were entangled by the blood vines that extended out from the sea of blood. He couldn't move at all. King Yan Zhuoxing, you actually dared to trick me. B*****, just you wait. Yu Qianqiu cursed. Seeing that he couldn't move his limbs, he immediately wanted to use his divine sense to contact Utopia. He wanted to teleport away and settle the score with Yan Zhuoxing later. However, what terrified him was that he couldn't use his divine sense to contact Utopia. He couldn't even circulate the quintessential essence in his body. He quickly looked around and was alarmed. How could such a boundless sea of blood appear in the treasure basin? Clearly this wasn't reality at all. Could it be that my sea of consciousness is trapped by this sea of blood? Brother Yin, let's talk nicely. There's no need to be angry over a few pots of blood orchids. As long as you let me out, I can have as many blood orchids as you want, and I'll guarantee the quality and quantity. Yu Qianqiu, who was trapped in the sea of blood, shook his head and shouted. Previously he was still cursing, but now that he realized that there was nothing he could do, he immediately gave in. In his words, a wise man doesn't fight when the odds are against him. As long as there's life, there's hope. When man who saw Yan Zhuixing use his demonic eyes to control Yu Qianqiu, he was stunned for a moment before he immediately laughed out loud. Yu Qianqiu, I didn't expect you to have such a day. Second junior brother, you can take revenge now. Man who couldn't hear the shouts in Yu Qianqiu's sea of consciousness, but Yan Zhuixing, whose eyes were shining with red light, could hear it. He sneered. Brother Yu, don't you think it's too late for you to say this now? Yu Qianqiu, who was trapped, immediately heard the rumbling sound coming from the sea of blood. It came from all directions, but he didn't know where it came from. He cursed the despicable and shameless beast in his heart. Sure enough, I guessed right. You've practiced some evil cultivation method. It's not too late, not too late. We can talk slowly and raise any conditions. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied. Yu Qianqiu laughed. However, his eyes were looking around in vain, trying to find a way to escape. I really want to have a good talk with you, brother Yu. However, it will have to wait until you become my puppet. Otherwise, brother Yu's endless tricks will make me worry. The demonic red light in Yan Zhuixing's eyes suddenly brightened. His words were like a devil's voice. Yu Qianqiu, from today onwards, I, Yan Zhuixing, will be your master. From today onwards, you will follow my orders. In the vast sea of blood, 7 blood snakes suddenly drilled out and hissed. They raised their slender bodies and let out a long hiss. Then they quickly broke through the blood waves and swam over. Fuck. What the hell is this? Yan Zhuixing, stop right now. Otherwise, sooner or later, I'll make you. Before Yu Qianqiu could finish his words, he was unable to make another sound. The heads of the 7 blood snakes became thin and drilled into his 7 orifices. Yu Qianqiu's body twisted and stopped moving. The blood vines that were binding his limbs loosened and retracted back into the sea of blood. They turned into 7 blood snakes that were connected to his 7 orifices in the sea of blood. The demonic red light in Yan Zhuixing's eyes quickly disappeared. He nodded to Man Hu and smiled. He's under my control. From now on he will listen to my orders. Yu Qianqiu, who was opposite him, stood there motionlessly with dull eyes. Kill him to avenge second junior brother. Man Hu laughed cruelly. His smile was full of joy. Yan Zhuixing frowned and quickly stood in front of him. He said in a deep voice, Eldest senior brother, don't act rashly. It's not the time to kill him yet. When Lan Feng and the others must know that he's here. If we don't see him, they'll definitely come to us for revenge. Don't cause trouble for master. Man Hu was startled and resentfully gave up on the action of revenge. Although he was eager for revenge, he knew that Yan Zhuixing's words made sense. Now was not the time to act rashly. Master couldn't deal with Wen Lanfeng's strength. At this moment, a golden light broke through the boundless sea of blood. The sea shone brightly and a golden sun rose. The moment it rose, it immediately suppressed the surging waves of the sea of blood to the point that it couldn't move. A golden light beam shot out from the sun and shone on Yu Qianqiu's 7 orifices that were sealed by the 7 blood snakes. The 7 blood snakes turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu's 7 orifices also began to emit black smoke. The smoke became fainter and fainter. Soon it disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianqiu's nostrils twitched. He opened his eyes and his gaze gradually became lively. As the golden light beam retracted, the entire sun suddenly erupted with a golden light. The boundless sea of blood couldn't withstand a single blow. Under the illumination of the light beam, it was like a righteous spirit looking down on the world. All demons and evil cultivators had nowhere to hide. They were all killed while wailing. The boundless sea of blood quickly rose into black smoke and dissipated. The sea of blood dissipated, revealing the vast and boundless sky of the universe, dotted with stars that would last for eternity. Chapter 646. The sea of blood in front of him suddenly turned into the stars of the universe. This kind of eternal brilliance made Yu Qianqiu somewhat dumbfounded. This was not the first time he saw this phenomenon. He remembered that the first time he saw it was in the 9th Netherworld cave. At that time he was also in a predicament. So it was not a dream last time? He looked at the endless starry sky in disbelief, and the countless stars seemed to be staring at him. This illusion disappeared slightly, and in front of him he saw Yan Zhuixing and Man Hu talking with confidence and composure, discussing how to play with him. Bastard. Fortunately, this old man is blessed with a good life. He actually wants to use me as a puppet. Evil demon bastard, I will eliminate the demon today. Yu Qianqiu was so angry that his teeth itched, but he did not act rashly. He first tried to circulate the true essence in his body. Normal. He then used his divine sense to connect with Utopia, and it returned to normal. Man Hu stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Junior brother, is he really completely under your control now? Yan Zhuixing smiled somewhat proudly. Yes, his sea of consciousness and primordial spirit have been controlled by my devil eye. As long as it is my command, he will definitely obey. But if he goes back with this stupid appearance, it is impossible for Wen Lanfeng and the others to not see some clues. I am afraid that even if he goes back alive, it will still be troublesome. Man Hu suddenly revealed a sinister expression. It is better to just kill him and end all troubles. Kill your mother. Yu Qianqiu almost jumped up to beat Man Hu, but he still endured it and continued to maintain his stupid appearance, wanting to probe the two beasts. Yan Zhuixing slightly frowned. Senior brother, don't be impatient. Revenge is not urgent. Although my cultivation is not enough to control someone with a higher cultivation than me, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation is more or less the same as mine. After being hit by my demon eye ecstasy, he has become my puppet. Even with the help of a late soul transformation expert, he cannot escape my control. Without a way to remove it, it is difficult to break the demon barrier in the sea of consciousness. As long as he is still under my control, it is easy to kill him. Even if I ask him to commit suicide, he will do it. Demon eye ecstasy, soul involuntarily. As long as I awaken the control of his consciousness, even if I let him go, he will look the same as usual. It will be very difficult for others to notice anything. Demon eye? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't expect there to be such an evil spell. I didn't expect the demon eye to be so powerful. Man Hu exclaimed in surprise and said with some joy, So, we can place an informer around Wen Lanfeng. He can be of great help at the critical moment. That's one of the reasons why I haven't killed him yet. Yan Zhuixing stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered, This brat has always been elusive. Who knows how many secrets he is hiding? I have to interrogate him properly. Not bad. Man Hu clapped his hands and praised, just in time to ask him where he got so many 7-star blood orchids. Seeing that he had figured it out, Yan Zhuixing was finally relieved. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Yu Qianqiu, let me ask you, where are the blood orchids that you previously sold? Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart and replied with a dumbfounded expression, I sold them all. Why is the answer the same as before? Yan Zhuixing frowned slightly and felt that something was wrong. He didn't believe that this guy who was full of nonsense was telling the truth. He paused and asked, Who did you sell it to? Niuyud. Yu Qianqiu replied. Yan Zhuixing and Man Hu looked at each other. Both of them had a lingering fear of Niuyud, this unfathomable and mysterious figure. Yan Zhuixing asked, Why did he buy the 7-star blood orchids? He said that he can't let the 7-star blood orchids fall into the hands of that little bastard called Yan Zhuixing. Otherwise he will harm the world sooner or later. Yu Qianqiu replied. The two of them didn't care about this scolding. Instead they felt a chill down their spine. It seemed that Niuyud had really seen through Yan Zhuixing's background. He could even see that he needed the 7-star blood orchids. Yan Zhuixing immediately asked, Do you know who that Niuyud is? An immortal from the immortal world. Yu Qianqiu said ignorantly. An immortal? The two of them couldn't help but exclaim. Yan Zhuixing asked again, How do you know that he is an immortal from the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu replied, I accidentally summoned him from the immortal world at the immortal ascension stage in the fog forest. The two of them looked at each other. They had heard Bing Qingzi say that there might be an immortal ascension stage in the fog forest, but they didn't expect it to be true. Man Hu couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianqiu, is the treasure left behind by the myriad swords demon monarch real? It's fake. Yu Qianqiu replied casually. Who knew that this casual remark of his would cause trouble? Yan Zhuixing squinted his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He said word by word in a deep voice, Yu Qianqiu, I order you to commit suicide immediately to atone for your crime. Man Hu looked at Yan Zhuixing in astonishment. He didn't know why Yan Zhuixing would suddenly say something like this. Yan Zhuixing was just counting the benefits of keeping Yu Qianqiu alive. Now that Yu Qianqiu is of great use, why does he want to kill Yu Qianqiu? What he didn't know was that the person controlled by the demonic eye would only listen to one person. Logically speaking, in such a muddle-headed state, it was impossible for Yan Zhuoxing to reply to him. Naturally, it aroused Yan Zhuoxing's suspicion. However, Yan Zhuoxing wasn't so sure. After all, he didn't have much experience in using it. He didn't know if there was a problem somewhere, so he wanted to give it a try. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He thought about it a few times, but he couldn't figure out where the problem was. Could it be that his reply to man who gave him away? He was a little depressed. He wanted to play the fool and make use of the two of them, but it seemed like he couldn't make use of them. Yes. Yu Qianqiu replied in a daze. He took out a big black saber from his storage bag. He raised the saber up high as if he was really going to commit suicide to atone for his crime. Suddenly, Yan Zhuoxing's eyes opened wide and he quickly retreated. Yu Qianqiu raised his saber and chased after Yan Zhuoxing. "Dog, hand over your life." Everything happened so suddenly. One was prepared and the other was ambushed. Yan Zhuoxing couldn't dodge in time and was about to be slashed. As he retreated, he suddenly clapped his hands and shouted, "Demonic charm, doppelganger." Swoosh swoosh swoosh. In a hurry, Yan Zhuoxing instantly split into three, and the three Yan Zhuoxing scattered like ghosts. Yu Qianqiu's eyes blurred. He was clearly about to slash his opponent, but who knew that his opponent would suddenly separate like three wisps of smoke. His sneak attack failed and he didn't know which one to chase. The three figures gathered behind him, and Yan Zhuoxing's original body was restored in an instant. Yu Qianqiu's intuition sensed the opponent's position, and he swept his saber behind him. At almost the same time, Yan Zhuoxing waved his fist that was surrounded by killing intent and shot over. He shouted, "Little devil fist." Man who was startled by the sudden change, immediately reacted after the two of them clashed. A cold light flashed out from his storage bag and shot towards Yu Qianqiu without hesitation. The flying sword was faster than Yan Zhuoxing's fist, and Yu Qianqiu spat on it. He changed the direction of his saber and slashed towards the flying sword. Dang! The flying sword was cut into two like tofu. The saber turned again to deal with the incoming fist, but it seemed to be a bit late. The black fiendish fist smashed onto the side of the saber. Bang! Yu Qianqiu's palm was numb from the impact, and he had no choice but to let go of the saber in his hand. Otherwise, he would definitely be injured if he forcefully held onto the saber with such a powerful force. Black pieces fluttered in the air, and the big black saber was actually shattered into hundreds of pieces by Yan Zhuoxing's fist. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't expect Yan Zhuoxing's fist to be so powerful. Seeing that Yan Zhuoxing no longer had the saber in his hand, Man who shouted, "Profound Yin palm." He teleported over and waved his palm towards Yan Zhuoxing's head. Although it wasn't as powerful as his master's profound Yin palm, as long as it hit Yu Qianqiu, the cold poison would be enough to make Yu Qianqiu lose the ability to resist. Devil's Claw. Yan Zhuoxing's fist instantly turned into 5 malevolent claws, and each of his fingers instantly became thin and sharp. With 5 red rays, the claws whizzed over and joined hands with Man Who to attack from the left and right. The three of them soared into the air and quickly exchanged blows. If Yu Qianqiu dared to be arrogant, he naturally had the ability to be arrogant. He wasn't someone to be trifled with, so he naturally had his own trump card. The word, "explode," popped out from his mouth. In that instant, Yan Zhuoxing's pupils shrank as he sensed the terrifying aura that he had seen in the saber-drawing assembly. While he was still in the air, he shouted, "Go!" The 5 claws grabbed onto Man Who's arm and burst forth with a powerful force, pushing him away. Yan Zhuoxing then rapidly retreated in the air with his arms spread out like a bat. The instant Man Whose body smashed through the wall, he personally witnessed the fragments of the big black saber explode on the ground. Intense black flames engulfed Yan Zhuoxing in a sea of flames, and a cold and terrifying aura surged over Man Who quivered from the cold and quickly teleported far away into the air. He exclaimed to the people below, "Junior brother." Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to let the power of the black flames spread too far, or it would definitely arouse the suspicion of Niu Yud and him. After the black flames exploded, he quickly retracted them back into his body. The instant he leapt into the air, although the entire shop wasn't on fire, it turned a deathly gray color and collapsed. He directly broke through the roof and leapt into the air. There was an uproar on the street. The people nearby all felt a sudden terrifying cold aura, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye, as though it was an illusion. Such a huge commotion immediately attracted the law enforcement guards led by Mu Lianqiu. They surrounded Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the air. Mu Lianqiu shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, how do you explain this? Yu Qianqiu ignored the law enforcement guards surrounding him and glanced coldly at Man Hu. Then he looked around and gathered his quintessential essence to speak loudly. Yanjuashing, I know you are fine. Why are you hiding? Everyone didn't go all out just now. If you have the ability, come out and fight again. Let me have a taste of your demonic technique. His voice resounded in the surroundings. There was no reaction from Yanjuashing, but more and more spectators gathered on the ground. Seeing how condescending he was, Mu Lianqiu immediately said furiously, Yu Qianqiu, what do you think the World Chamber of Commerce is? It's none of your business. If you don't want to die, then get out of my way. Yu Qianqiu didn't even look at him. He shook his sleeves and green lights flashed out from his sleeves like floating clouds and flowing water. Countless green flying swords circled around his body and dispersed. Chapter 647. The law enforcement guards surrounding Yu Qianqiu were forced away by the ever-growing group of flying swords. Mu Lianqiu's expression was gloomy, and he wished for nothing more than to take down Yu Qianqiu on the spot. However, he knew clearly in his heart that the targets of law enforcement and punishment didn't include people with deep backgrounds like Yu Qianqiu. It was fine to frighten ordinary cultivators, but once he acted rashly, the consequences weren't something he could bear. There were some things that everyone was well aware of, and it was important to give each other face. However, people like Yu Qianqiu did not follow common sense at all. He caused trouble again and again, treating cornucopia's rules like bullsh*t. The strict image that Mu Lianqiu had painstakingly built up for the world commerce was destroyed in one day. He unscrupulously tore down the shameful cover of strict law enforcement, allowing everyone to see the ugly face behind it. What rules? They were just bullying the weak. When encountering a powerful person, they immediately revealed their true colors. Yu Qianqiu had always scoffed at this broken rule, let alone now. A total of 2,000 green flying swords hovered in the air. The scene was truly spectacular. No one present had seen a person controlling so many flying swords at the same time. They were all dumbfounded and sighed inwardly. The number one expert below the soul formation stage was indeed not just for show. Actually, this was not the upper limit of what Yu Qianqiu could control. He had tried it at the Immortal Ascension platform. With his current early-stage tribulation passing cultivation, he could control 3,000 flying swords at the same time. However, it seemed that it was not stable to control it in a fight. He could only control 2,000 flying swords with ease. The brilliant green flying swords hovered in the air, forming a huge green halo. Yu Qianqiu stood in the center with a murderous aura as he swept his gaze around. He was really angry. His robe swelled up without any wind and fluttered in the wind. He did not restrain his murderous aura at all. He had almost died today. Yan Zhuixing's demonic technique was a great taboo to him. If he did not get rid of him before he matured, Yu Qianqiu would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. The enmity between the two sides was very difficult to reconcile. Sooner or later they would have to fight to the death. If he was allowed to grow, it was needless to say who would be the unlucky one. What made Yu Qianqiu the most unwilling was that the 7 pots of blood orchids were very likely to be of great benefit to Yan Zhuixing's demonic arts, yet he had to personally give them to him. Inside the Onyx Palace, a black light flashed and turned into the cold and noble Lady Blackpool. However, there was an irrepressible anger in that noble temperament. Even though she was suppressing it, others could still see that she was in a bad mood. Dragging her long skirt, she climbed up to the back seat in the middle of the hall. Her phoenix eyes glanced at the maids on both sides who didn't dare to come close, and she knew that she was a little angry. After slowly calming himself down, he called out, Fei Feng. Maid Fei Feng walked to the back seat and bowed. Madam, what can I do for you? Madame Blackpool said indifferently, The Underworld Emperor asked me to send someone to the human world to find the lost door knocker. Who do you think should go? She had no hope of getting out, so she didn't want to get involved in this matter. However, the Underworld Emperor ordered that even if she had to deal with it, she had to pretend to do it. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain to the Underworld Emperor when he asked. Fei Feng bowed and said, Since it is the Underworld Emperor's order, we should send a smart and capable person. Any commander of the army of the Dark Underworld can be qualified for this position. Enough. Madame Blackpool suddenly slammed her palm on the armrest of the back seat. No one knew where the anger came from. Fei Feng knelt down and kowtowed in fear, saying, Fei Feng said something wrong. Please forgive me, madam. Madame Blackpool was about to say something disrespectful, but she forcefully suppressed it. She looked around, wondering if there were spies of the Underworld Palace here. She put on a smile and said, You didn't say anything wrong. But the army of the dark underworld is responsible for suppressing the riots and maintaining the stability of the underworld. It can't be mobilized easily. Otherwise, if something unexpected happens, I can't explain to the underworld emperor. Yes. I didn't consider it thoroughly, Fei Feng said while kowtowing. But she murmured in her mind that there were tens of thousands of commanders in the army of the dark underworld. What could mobilizing one commander do? Madame Blackpool said with a smile. Moreover, it is not necessary to mobilize a commander in the human world. Where's Lu Mei? I haven't seen him for a long time. Lu Mei offended Madame last time and was sent to prison by Madame, Fei Feng reminded her carefully. It is just a small matter. He has been punished. Let him out. Madame Blackpool waved her hand and said, Tell him to come see me as soon as possible. Fei Feng took the order and left. Soon she came back with a tall and thin man with green eyebrows and a pale face. As soon as the man stepped into the palace gate, he ran to the back of the palace and kneeled down, crying, Madam, your servant knows his sin, your servant knows his sin, your servant should not have made Madam unhappy. His voice was sharp and shrill, there was a hint of an eunuch's voice. All right, don't cry. I forgive you. Come here. Madame Blackpool waved her hand with a smile. Lu Mei immediately crawled to the back seat. He hugged her legs and massaged them gently. He looked up at her and smiled through his tears. Madam, thank you for your forgiveness. Madam, you don't know. I feel worse than death if I don't see you for a day. If you punish me again, please don't put me in prison again. I can't bear the pain of not seeing you. I would rather die at your feet. Madame Blackpool was amused by him and laughed. The haze in her heart disappeared. She then nodded and smiled. I understand your loyalty. That is why I have a good task for you to do as a reward for your loyalty. No, I am not going anywhere. I would rather die than leave Madam. Lu Mei hugged Madame Blackpool's legs and refused to let go. Madame Blackpool's phoenix eyes immediately turned cold. She said indifferently, You dare to disobey me? Lu Mei was startled. He let go of her legs and kowtowed repeatedly, Madam, if you have any orders, just let me know. I will die 10,000 times for you. Flattery sounded nice, but it was impossible for him not to be afraid of death. How could a shameless person not be afraid of death in order to survive? That's right. Madame Blackpool recovered her smile and said, A knocker and 2 animal teeth on the door ornaments of one of the underworld gates in the 72 world passages were stolen. The Emperor of the Underworld ordered me to send someone to the human world to find them. It is such a good task. I think only your loyalty can reassure me. Lu Mei, you won't disappoint me, will you? Hearing this, Fei Feng glanced at him secretly but didn't dare to say anything. She didn't know what Madame Blackpool was thinking. How could she let a flattering man carry out the task ordered by the Emperor of the Underworld? She should at least find someone with a high cultivation state. Lu Mei looked up at Madame Blackpool in disbelief. It was indeed a good task. Who didn't want to go back to the human world after living in the dark underworld? But he knew what he was capable of. Besides, he had accompanied Madame for a long time, and he knew that Madame Blackpool wanted to travel to the human world. How could she give such a good opportunity to him? He couldn't figure it out. What? You don't want to do it? Madame Blackpool asked in a deep voice. No. Lu Mei waved his hands and said gingerly, But my cultivation state is too low. I am only in the middle stage of the underworld warrior. I am afraid that I will ruin the Emperor of the Underworld's plan and implicate Madame. The cultivation states in the underworld were divided into 4 levels. The Underworld Warrior, the Underworld Saint, the Underworld Venerable, and the Underworld Emperor. Each level was further divided into 3 levels. The top ghost practitioners in the human world, even if they had the cultivation state of the Ghost Saint, were just mediocre in the underworld. They were at most the outstanding ghosts, but they couldn't form the underworld body. Once they formed the underworld body, they could travel between the 3 realms. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to expose themselves under the scorching sun. There was a big difference between the 2 levels. You worry too much about this. Madame Blackpool said disdainfully, In the human world, the top swordsmen are only in the last stage of the Huashan realm. In fact, they are not even in the early stage of the underworld warrior. You are in the middle stage of the underworld warrior, so you can be invincible in the human world. What is there to be afraid of? Lu Mei's eyes brightened. How could he forget this after staying in the underworld for so long? His cultivation state in the underworld was not very high, but in the human world he was definitely a top-notch swordsman. He said with a silly smile, I am stupid. Thank you for reminding me, madam. I will try my best to complete the task assigned by Madam. Madame Blackpool glanced at him enviously and sent a message to him secretly, "You should take care of your business first. After that, I will allow you to stay in the human world for half a month. Remember, write down anything new and tell me about it when you come back." After sending the message, she said seriously, "Go find Fei Feng. She will tell you where you are going." After receiving the secret decree, Lu Mei kowtowed with a smile and said, "I will try my best to complete the task assigned by Madam." Then he left. In the hall of the Ghost King in the Chilly Wind Valley, Yuji and the others still had not figured out what happened in the 9th Netherworld cave last time. Seeing that there was no negative reaction after the incident, they gradually forgot about it. But they still had some doubts. But just as the Ghost Generals gathered to discuss the matter, outside the Ghost King Hall, a fierce wind suddenly blew violently again, causing the outside world to darken. Everyone was shocked. Yuji dashed out first and led a group of Ghost Generals to the outside of the 9th Netherworld cave again. However, just as everyone arrived, the violent and angry wind suddenly returned to normal, causing the group of people to scratch their heads in confusion. In the deepest part of the 9th Netherworld cave, behind the 1-meter-wide Netherworld gate, a green light flashed. Lu Mei suddenly appeared and looked around. After the Netherworld gate behind him closed slowly, he turned around and stared at the place where one of the knockers was missing. He laughed in a high-pitched voice, "How dare you? It seems that the cultivators in the human world are tired of living. How dare you steal the thing on the Netherworld gate? Today I will let you know my power when I come to the human world." Not only did he know how to flatter and boast, but he also had a serious and responsible attitude when doing things. Otherwise, he would not be able to survive under Madame Blackpool's feet until now. Starting from the Netherworld gate, he looked for clues of the theft bit by bit. However, he did not find anything special until he passed through the Netherworld Fire Sea and landed at the entrance of the cave. He was attracted by some words on the cave wall. Chapter 648. Predecessors plant trees, descendants enjoy the shade. Nianfeng's eyes are sad. I was kind-hearted, so I dug a tunnel to make it convenient for descendants to enter and exit, leaping over 1,000 worries? Green Eyebrows was confused, not knowing what he meant. Nanhai Nongzhu came here. Yiqianqiu. There are quite a lot of people here. Lu Mei's eyes suddenly froze. There was a line of handwriting on the hard iron without any pause. Obviously it was written in one go. It could be seen that the person's cultivation was obviously higher than the previous two. He could not help but murmur, "The world is lonely and invincible, but I have no fate to ascend to heaven. I have long heard that the netherworld is equal to the world of immortals and wants to find a strong opponent. What a reckless human cultivator. How arrogant." He was already laughing sinisterly at the end of the sentence. "By Changchun, the world is invincible. It seems that you are the one who stole the knocker. Ordinary people can't reach the gate of the underworld." Lu Mei laughed sinisterly. He had already found the target he was looking for. He turned into a green light and flashed out of the 9th Netherworld cave. However, he hadn't gone far when he reappeared and stopped. He looked at the tunnel under his feet and then at the eye of the wind in front of him. After a moment of shock, he finally understood what the line of words meant. It turned out that someone had dug a tunnel in the Netherworld cave and wanted it to be convenient for the descendant to enter and exit. Yuqianqiu? Another reckless guy. I didn't expect the human cultivator to be so arrogant that he dares to destroy the things in front of the underworld. After a sharp laughter, the green light floated up and directly passed through the eye of the wind and disappeared. Outside the 9th Netherworld cave, everyone stared at the entrance for a long time. After a moment of hesitation, Cai Zhangfei and Zhang Ling suddenly cupped their hands and said to Yuji, "Madam, I would like to go to the 9th Netherworld cave to find out what is going on." Yuji shook her head gently and said, "No need, you can't go deep inside. No one knows what is going on inside. Breaking in by force is tantamount to suicide. Let nature take its course. It will explode as long as it doesn't affect us." Before he could finish his sentence, he heard a gasp of surprise from the crowd. A green light flashed out of the cave and turned into a person floating in the air, looking around curiously. The person was tall and thin, wearing a brocade green robe. The most peculiar thing was that there was a pair of green eyebrows on his pale face. No one could see through his level of cultivation, and he came from the 9th Abyss cave. Everyone looked at each other and they had a faint guess that they did not dare say out loud. Beside the 1,000-mile lake of the Obedient Island, by Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, had been paying attention to the movements in the mirror. When he saw the green-robed man coming out from the 9 Netherworld cave, he immediately raised his hand and put away the mirror. He disappeared without hesitation and flashed in the direction of the Chan Chili Wind Valley. On the cliff, Yu Ji gave Ghost General Zhang Ling a meaningful look. The latter took a step forward, cupped his hands and said, "May I know which expert has graced us with his presence in the Valley of Chili Wind?" The green-robed person ignored his question and coldly checked everyone's cultivation. He didn't find anyone worth mentioning. None of them seemed to be people who could easily leave words on the Netherworld iron. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh in a shrill voice. What a group of pitiful people. After death, they didn't go to the underworld to serve the Emperor of the Underworld. Instead, they stayed in the human world and became neither human nor ghost. I am the Underworld Messenger. I have something to ask you. Who is your leader? Come out and answer. The Underworld Messenger? Everyone was shocked. Just as they had guessed, they all became uneasy. Although Yu Ji was afraid as the leader, others could retreat, but she couldn't. She squeezed out a smile and bowed. I am the Lord of Chili Wind Valley. What does the Underworld Messenger want to ask? Oh woman? The green-robed person glanced at the ghost generals. She didn't expect the leader to be a woman. A trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She said indifferently, I ask you something. You have to answer honestly. Otherwise, you will have to bear the consequences. Let me ask you, do you know who stole the knocker from the gate of the underworld? Hearing this, everyone was shocked again. They didn't expect that someone would dare to steal from the gate of the underworld. Yu Ji forced herself to be calm and shook her head. We really don't know about this. The green-robed person snorted coldly. As the master of this place, how can you not know? Do you want me to punish you before you will tell the truth? Please calm down, Underworld Messenger. Yu Ji smiled apologetically. The gate of the underworld is a legendary thing to us. Nobody has seen it. With our cultivation, we won't be able to get there. If someone could get there, their cultivation would definitely be higher than ours. It would be a piece of cake for them to hide from our eyes and not be discovered. The green-robed person thought for a while and nodded slightly. This is the truth. I don't think you dare to lie to me. Let me ask you again. Who has the highest cultivation in this world? Who is invincible? Yu Ji subconsciously thought of Bai Changchun, but she didn't dare to speak nonsense. She replied again, Underworld Messenger, you don't know this. This place is called the Demon Ghost Domain. It is a place where demons and ghosts live together. We live here and never ask about the affairs of the human world. In addition, our cultivation is low, so we don't dare to ask. So, we really don't know who has the highest cultivation in this world. What a group of pitiful people. The green-robed person looked at everyone and shook his head with pity. It was as if he was showing off how happy his life in the underworld was. He then asked, let me ask you again. Do you know where a person called Bai Changchun is? Hearing this, the ghost generals suddenly felt a little uneasy. Green eyebrows glanced at them and saw everyone's actions. Then he laughed and said, it seems that you all know this person. I'll tell you the truth. This Bai Changchun is the biggest suspect for stealing the knocker. If you hide anything from me, I'll treat you as an accomplice and punish you severely. Tell me, where is this person? Yu Ji wanted to say that she didn't know, but everyone lost their cool. It was impossible for her to say that she didn't know. However, she didn't dare to reveal Bai Changchun's location. She rolled her eyes and said perfunctorily, this person has been here before and his cultivation is very high. She raised her hand and pointed to the west. Go west. There is a place where many soul formation experts live. I heard that person lives there. Her words were more or less a test. She deliberately said that there were many soul formation experts. She wanted to see how the Underworld Messenger would react. If he was afraid, then there was no doubt that this person was not a match for the torture envoy. At the same time, she could use the time when he was sent away to quickly rush to the torture envoy to report. With the torture envoy around, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, what she didn't know was that her random pointing had caused a lot of trouble for the group of soul formation experts in the treasure basin. The green-robed person looked to the west and nodded. Go west, right? I hope you didn't lie to me. Otherwise, think about the consequences yourself. As soon as she finished speaking, she flew up to the sky and easily passed through the protective array. Once she flashed to the sky above the demon ghost region, she immediately raised her hand to cover her eyes. Under the strong sunlight, she felt really uncomfortable. After she got used to it, she cursed, damn the sun. She turned into a green light and fled to the west. As soon as the green-robed person left, the ghost generals below immediately started discussing. Yuji was even more dazed. She said that there were many soul formation experts in the West, but the underworld messenger was still not afraid. Obviously, his cultivation was very high and he didn't care about the soul formation experts at all. If even the torture envoy was not a match for him, she would have to face terrible consequences. The ghost generals were not fools. They naturally knew the consequences of the madam's words. After a long silence, Zhang Ling walked over worriedly and asked, "Madam, what should we do?" When Yuji heard this, she quickly restrained her emotions and a confident look of encouragement appeared on her face. Lord Disciplinary Envoy is famous throughout the world, and his cultivation base is unfathomable. Don't worry everyone. I'll head to Obedient Island right now to report the details to Lord Disciplinary Envoy. Everyone looked at each other. Although she said that the other party was an envoy from the underworld, his cultivation was definitely not ordinary, so it was strange that they didn't worry. However, Zhang Ling cupped his hands and said with an unusually firm tone, "I am willing to accompany you to Shuntian Island." Yuji smiled indifferently and nodded slightly. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Zhang Ling and the group of ghost generals kneeling down in terror and bowing. "Greetings, Lord Disciplinary Envoy." Yuji suddenly turned around and saw an old man in a green robe standing behind her. He seemed to be staring at the entrance of the 9th Netherworld cave. Looking at his back, who else could it be but the torture envoy? She was so scared that she immediately knelt down and said, "Yuji greets the torture envoy." Bai Changchun slowly turned around. His eyes were shining brightly on his thin face. He glanced at the people kneeling on the ground, and his gaze finally landed on Yuji, who was kneeling on the ground. With an emotionless tone he asked, "Where did the man in green go?" Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect that the torture envoy already knew what happened here. Otherwise, how could he know that there was a man in the green robe? Yuji immediately repeated the conversation between her and the man in the green robe in detail. She didn't dare to hide anything. Bai Changchun looked to the west and snorted expressionlessly, "The underworld envoy? That's exactly what I want. As long as I'm here, how can you people from the underworld do as you please? Let me deal with you." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. A white hole appeared in the west corner of the protective formation, and then it slowly closed. The people kneeling down only dared to stand up after a long time. They all opened their eyes with lingering fear and disappointment. Thinking of the torture envoy's words, they were all speechless. The torture envoy was indeed the torture envoy. From what he said just now, he went to chase after the underworld envoy. In the treasure bowl, Yu Qianshou, who was surrounded by a huge cyan halo, stood in the air. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. With a murderous aura, he shouted again, "Yan Zhuixing, if you still don't come out, prepare to collect your first senior brother's corpse." The onlookers were in an uproar. They once again witnessed Yu Qianshou's arrogance. Man who was in the air, said sternly, "Yu Qianshou, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? If it wasn't for Senior when backing you up, we might not even know who would be collecting the corpse." Chapter 649. What a stubborn duck. Yu Qianshou snorted coldly. Numerous sword shadows wrapped around him and rose to the same height as Man Hu. He said indifferently, "Are you interested in a duel with me? We'll fight to the death. Don't run away. Those who die can only blame it on their bad luck. If you can kill me, I'll say this in advance. Senior One won't look for trouble with you. Everyone can be my witness. Do you dare?" With Yu Qianshou's current means, he didn't care about experts at the late stage of crossing tribulation. The only problem was that his cultivation was still lacking. If he fought with experts at the late stage of crossing tribulation, he wouldn't be able to catch up if his opponent used teleportation. That was why he provoked Man Hu. First he set a rule. No one was allowed to run. It was up to Man Hu to agree. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Man Hu shouted. Regardless of whether he could win against Yu Qianshou or not, he couldn't lose the face of Ice Palace as the chief disciple. Haha. Yu Qianshou laughed wildly. "Good, you've got guts." "Stop." An angry shout came. Bing Qingzi suddenly appeared. A group of 300 people appeared on the God of Wealth peak. All of them were lords of spirit severing stage. Their imposing manner was astonishing, but none of them looked good. Even Yin Baikong was astonishingly among them. However, his complexion was even worse than Yu Qianshou's. His eyes were fixedly staring at Yu Qianshou as if he wanted to skin him alive. Bing Qingzi's gaze landed on the collapsed Ice Palace. His hair and beard stood on end as he roared at Yu Qianshou, Yu Qianqiu, do you really think I won't dare to kill you? Bing Qingzi, why are you angry at a junior? What's there to say? When Lanfeng, Lu Yanqing and Nongzhu showed up at the crucial moment. When Lanfeng couldn't intervene in the matters between juniors. But when a group of old guys showed up, he couldn't ignore it. However, when Lanfeng had a headache. Why was this kid always causing trouble? Couldn't he just stop and rest? When Lanfeng. Bing Qingzi angrily pointed at the shop below and said, "What is the meaning of this? Don't go too far." Nongzhu glanced at it and touched her forehead speechlessly. This matter was getting out of hand. Lu Yanqing was already frowning. When Lanfeng paused and looked at Yu Qianqiu. "Put away your flying sword. What's going on? What happened?" Yu Qianqiu retorted with a question, and then he looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. The flying sword circled and danced even faster, and his killing intent erupted once again. He pointed at Manhu and said sternly, "Manhu, do you dare to swear that you will tell me everything that Yan Juexing did to me?" Hearing him say such angry words, everyone's gaze turned towards Manhu. Barbarian Tiger was caught unprepared. Just a moment ago he was ready to fight, but now his heroic spirit suddenly turned into dodgy eyes. He couldn't tell them about Yan Juexing's demonic skill, so he was trying to think of a countermeasure. Everyone could see that something was wrong with his hesitation. Bing Qingzi was shocked when Yan Juexing was mentioned. He looked around but didn't find Yan Juexing. He immediately asked anxiously, "Manhu, where is your junior brother?" Manhu transmitted his voice, "Junior brother's demonic skill has been exposed. He should be hiding." But he shook his head and said, "I don't know." Bing Qingzi looked around carefully again. If he couldn't find Yan Juexing, it would be hard for others to find him. He felt a little relieved. However, there was someone who was not satisfied. Nongzhu took a step forward in the air, squinted her eyes and asked in a weird tone, "Yu Qianqiu, what did Yan Juexing do to you?" With Wen Lanfeng's support, Nongzhu didn't want to show up. But hearing Yu Qianqiu's angry words, she guessed that he must have suffered a great loss. Otherwise he wouldn't have disobeyed Wen Lanfeng. Although he and Yu Qianqiu were always at loggerheads, he couldn't just watch as his old friend Bai Changchun's disciple was bullied. To put it more selfishly, it was the law of the jungle in the cultivation world. Only Bai Changchun's disciple bullied others. How could he be bullied by others? If he really didn't do anything, it would be hard for him to explain to Bai Changchun in the future. When Lanfeng also noticed that something was wrong with Nongzhu. There was a faint murderous intent in her eyes. He was a little surprised, but then he understood. If this matter wasn't handled well, Bai Changchun might get out of the demon domain and the whole cultivation world would be turned upside down. Although that old guy usually hid in the demon domain and didn't say a word, once he came out, he wouldn't stop until there was a bloodbath. Instead of letting Bai Changchun come out to fight, it was better to solve it in a small area. When Lanfeng immediately pulled himself together and said coldly, "Yu Qianqiu, if you have something to say, just say it. I'd like to see who's playing tricks." A silver light flashed out of the storage bag and floated in front of him. The broad body of the sword was shining with silver light. Giant silver sword. There was a cry of surprise from below. Lu Yanqing looked at Wen Lanfeng in surprise, which didn't match his temper. More than 200 lords of the spirit-severing realm also looked at each other. They hadn't figured out the matter yet, but when Lanfeng had already drawn his sword. It seemed that this matter couldn't be taken lightly. "Damn it. You should have done this long ago. Today, let's join hands and kill Yan Juexing." Yu Qianqiu became more courageous. He stared at Bing Qingzi and sneered, "Senior Bing, you must know why I came to the Ice Palace shop today, right? Don't talk nonsense. How would I know why a junior like you came here?" Bing Qingzi denied flatly. His eyes were also faintly filled with killing intent. He had wanted to take this opportunity to silence Yu Qianqiu, but when Lanfeng had also sensed that something was wrong. When Lanfeng was staring at him like a tiger watching its prey, not giving him any chance. You can't escape the truth even if you don't admit it. Yu Qianqiu snickered and surveyed the surroundings as he said, "I've long heard that Yan Juexing possesses a peerless mystical art. I didn't believe it at first, but I experienced it for myself today. What a powerful demonic art. If I didn't have some special skills, I would have lost my life." Demonic art. There was an uproar in the surroundings. When Lanfeng and Nongzhu looked at each other, not knowing whether it was true or not. Bing Qingzi shouted angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, don't make irresponsible remarks. It's not your turn to talk nonsense here." The lid of the pot was lifted a little, revealing the aroma of meat. Even the wolves couldn't help but smell it. Pei Fong, who was in front of the crowd, smiled with his fat face shaking. Brother Bing, he hasn't finished speaking. Why are you so anxious? If it's really nonsense, everyone will naturally know what's going on. Then he turned to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, Yu Qianqiu, can you explain the devil technique you're talking about a bit more clearly? It would be best if you explain everything in detail so that everyone can judge whether it's right or wrong. Otherwise, you'll wrongly accuse an innocent person. Then he turned to the people around him and shouted, Everyone, don't you agree? Not bad, not bad. A lot of people responded. Most of them were from Pei Fong's camp. Bing Qingzi suddenly stared at him and shouted, Fatty Pei, what do you mean? Do you want to hit me when I'm down? Pei Fong didn't care about him, lest he gave him an excuse. He waved his broken hand at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, Yu Qianqiu, speak boldly. With Brother Wen's support and so many people's support, just say it. He didn't seem to care about Wen Lanfeng's broken hand at all. How could Yu Qianqiu let go of the great opportunity to kill Yan Juexing in front of him? He looked around and said, Seniors, do you still remember that I set up a stall to sell 7-star blood orchids yesterday? After the trouble, Yan Juexing came to me and said that he wanted to buy a lot of 7-star blood orchids and asked me to meet him at the Ice Palace shop. I thought it was true and came here today. Who knew that Yan Juexing immediately turned hostile after getting the orchids? First, he used an evil method called Demon Eye Ecstasy, which was really powerful. Both of his eyes were emitting blood-red light that could take away one's soul. I didn't even know what was going on before I was controlled by him. Yu Qianqiu, don't speak nonsense to confuse us. Shut up. Bing Qingzi was really anxious. Anyone could tell that he was like a cornered dog that would do something desperate. He had the tendency to go berserk. Pei Fong winked at Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang De, and the three of them stood between him and Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, speak boldly. Pei Fong sneered. Whether it was true or not, the three of them would benefit the most from defeating Bing Qingzi. That was why the three of them were so proactive in protecting Yu Qianqiu's safety. The gloomy Yin Baikong secretly transmitted his voice to Sikongju. Send more people to set up ambushes at all the passages of Cornucopia. Don't let Yan Juexing escape. It's best to capture him alive. Sikongju quietly left to make arrangements. Hee. Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, I reckon that Yan Juexing hasn't mastered his demonic arts. Perhaps he's still in the beginning stages. After I lost consciousness for a short while, I actually recovered. I unintentionally overheard his conversation with Manhu. It turns out that his demon eye ecstasy can turn people into his puppets. No matter how high your cultivation is, you will still be controlled by him. Furthermore, the 7-star blood orchid can help him master his demonic arts quickly. Once he succeeds, he will unify the entire cultivation world. Since he wanted to target Yan Juexing, it was impossible for him to not add oil to the fire. He continued to ramble. As soon as my body returned to normal, I immediately fought with the two of them. TSK. He casually threw a punch called Little Demonic Fist, and actually shattered my big black saber into pieces. Amazing. My saber is a treasure saber that surpasses high-grade spiritual treasure. It actually couldn't block a single punch from him. Once he masters his demonic arts, it will be terrible. What a pity. When he saw that his demonic arts were exposed and that he couldn't kill me in a short period of time, he didn't bother me and immediately ran away. Everyone saw what happened afterward. Manhu, the person involved, naturally knew that Yu Qianqiu was taking the opportunity to blow up the matter. He immediately shouted, Seniors, don't listen to his nonsense. He's completely talking nonsense. He and my junior brother have a grudge in China's cultivation world. He's taking the opportunity to take revenge. Bing Qingzi also sneered, Yu Qianqiu, do you really think that we're all 3-year-old kids that can be easily fooled? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. It sounded too mysterious and they didn't know if it was true or not. But for Pei Fong and the other two, it was enough for them to blow up the matter. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and said, It's easy to distinguish whether it's true or not. You can call Yan Juexing out and confront him face to face. I have a way to force out his demonic arts. Ignorant Junior, who do you think I am? Do you think I have to listen to your orders? If it wasn't for giving face to the others, would you still be alive today? Bing Qingzi said with a stern expression. Just at this moment, Sikongju quickly flashed over and cupped his hands towards Yin Baikong. Master, there's news from the passageway. Yan Juexing has already left the treasure basin in a hurry 2 hours ago. Chapter 650. When Yu Qianshou heard the news, he couldn't help but curse, "Bastard! I let him escape." The flying swords that were densely packed around his body were also withdrawn. He quickly flew to Wen Lanfeng's camp. The situation wasn't right, it was safer here. Everyone's gaze was focused on Bing Qingzi. Yin Baikong said in a deep voice, "Brother Bing, how do you explain this?" "What do I need to explain?" Bing Qingzi tilted his head and sneered, "You should think about how to explain to us about the 7-treasure pill." Yin Baikong immediately lost his temper and stared coldly at Yu Qianshou. The 7-treasure pill that was sold had already claimed dozens of lives. Until now, no one had figured out what was going on. However, Yin Baikong had already locked onto Yu Qianshou as the biggest suspect. Pei Fang laughed, "Bing Qingzi, you're trying to change the topic at the wrong time. If Yan Zhuoxing didn't have a guilty conscience, why would he run?" Bing Qingzi gave Manhu a look, and the latter quickly went to his master's side. The master and disciple had their backs to the crowd, seemingly ready to fight with their lives on the line. Bing Qingzi calmly looked around and said, "Fatty Pei, don't fan the flames here. Yan Zhuoxing only went out for a while, who said he ran away." Hearing that Yan Zhuoxing had escaped from the treasure basin, Bing Qingzi immediately felt relieved. It was a vast primeval forest outside, and more than 2 hours had passed. It wouldn't be easy to catch Yan Zhuoxing again. At the very least, the various forces wouldn't be able to organize a large-scale capture like last time in a short period of time. He believed that Yan Zhuoxing could handle it with his emergency ability. Since he didn't run, can Brother Bing summon Yan Zhuoxing back so that we can ask him face to face? Pei Fang asked. "What a joke, how would I know where he went?" As Bing Qingzi spoke, he saw many people rushing towards the exit of the treasure basin. It was obvious that the various lords had already secretly ordered their disciples to search for Yan Zhuoxing. He then turned to Manhu and said, "It seems that we're not welcome here, let's go." He couldn't care about anything else now. He had to find a way to help Yan Zhuoxing escape first. "I won't send you off." Pei Fang waved his hand generously. He glanced at Yin Baikong. The alliance of the three was about to collapse. After Bing Qingzi left, everyone would definitely find Yin Baikong to settle the 7-treasure pill. After forcing Bing Qingzi away and suppressing Yin Baikong, only Hu Changshou would be left. After resolving these big obstacles, Yan Zhuoxing wouldn't be able to escape. Pei Fang, Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangde exchanged glances, and they couldn't help but reveal a smile on their faces. The stalemate that had lasted for so many years was finally going to end. The primeval forest outside the primeval forest had existed for God knows how long. Yan Zhuoxing gathered his strength and flew wildly in the sky. Once he sensed someone in front of him, he immediately hid in the forest. When there was no movement in the sky, he flew wildly again. Yen, Yang Shant, Yent stay in the sect. Yen Yunt, Donk Yen Int. Yent from Yen. T. He couldn't stay in the treasure basin anymore since his demonic arts were exposed. Most of the spirit-severing experts in the cultivation world were gathered in the treasure basin. He couldn't resist them with his current cultivation. He made a prompt decision and escaped from the treasure basin without hesitation. If he was a little later, he wouldn't be able to escape. Bing Qingzi alone couldn't deal with so many experts. Moreover, there was Wen Lanfeng behind Yu Qianshou. At the thought of Wen Lanfeng, Yan Zhuoxing, who was fleeing desperately, was more or less worried that Wen Lanfeng would not let Bing Qingzi and his disciple go. After all, he had attacked Yu Qianshou, and Wen Lanfeng was obviously supporting Yu Qianshou. If something happened to Bing Qingzi, he would lose his only backer in the cultivation world. He would have to rely on himself for everything. Yan Zhuoxing touched his storage bag subconsciously and his eyes became firm. With these 7 blood orchids, he could make a comeback even without Bing Qingzi's support. That day wouldn't be too far away. Considering that something might happen to Bing Qingzi, Yan Zhuoxing didn't escape to the Ice Palace. Even if Bing Qingzi was fine, he wasn't going to the Ice Palace. The lesson of being chased last time was still fresh in his mind. Presumably, various forces had already sent messages and arranged people to wait for him on the way to the Ice Palace. He just wanted to find a safe place to improve his demonic arts and cultivation with the help of the 7-star blood orchids. He wasn't worried that Bing Qingzi and his disciple would be angry at him for abandoning them and escaping alone. They should know that even if he was still in the treasure basin, they couldn't change the outcome. They couldn't protect him at all. Instead, if he escaped, there would be a chance for them to avoid a bloody battle. Because the curse on them would force them to risk their lives to save him. The only thing Yan Zhuoxing couldn't figure out was why his magic eye ecstasy didn't work on Yu Qianshou. Victory was already in his grasp, but in an instant he had to flee in panic. The situation was completely reversed. He thought about it all the way, but he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He took a deep breath and decided not to think about it for now. The right thing to do was to escape as far as possible. Now was the best time to escape. Even one more second would be good. Once the pursuers came, he would have to hide in the dense forest below again. Yan Juexing stared at the front with rapt attention as the wind blew past him. Suddenly, the pupils in his cold and firm eyes shrunk. He saw smoke rising from the distant dense forest. In such a primeval forest, there were groups of ferocious beasts. It was impossible for anyone to live here. It must be a cultivator. Yan Juexing suddenly disappeared in the air and turned into 3 wisps of green smoke that drilled into the dense forest below. Then he reappeared. Then he used the charm body movement technique. A shadow quietly stepped on the leaves and approached the place where the smoke was rising. After arriving at the destination, he gently leaned on the branch of a big tree and looked down. In the open space below, a cultivator who looked like an old urchin was rolling up his sleeves and happily roasting a golden and oily wild boar. He seemed to be enjoying it. This person was none other than third brother Xan. Ever since Lu Yanqing settled in the one family shop, she let him go. Third brother Xian naturally had no objections. Without his master's restriction, he was happy and free. Then the vast primeval forest outside the treasure bowl became his paradise. He searched for all kinds of wild animals and made up his mind to roast a wild animal that could surpass Yu Qianqiu's. Yan Juexing didn't know him, but he found that he couldn't see through his cultivation. The other party was obviously an expert at the tribulation passing stage. After carefully looking around and confirming that there was no one else, he waved his hand and lightly knocked on the tree trunk. Third brother Xan suddenly looked up and said, "Who is it?" However, what he saw was a pair of demonic red eyes that emitted a soul-stirring light. Third brother Xian's expression instantly became confused and the stick in his hand fell to the ground. After a while, Yan Juexing restrained the red light in his eyes and let out a sigh of relief. The other party's cultivation was obviously not at the soul-forming stage. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to use the demon eye ecstasy with his cultivation. Time doesn't wait for me. I have no choice but to take a gamble. Lightly floating down from the tree, he punched the bonfire on the ground with his little magic fist. With a dull thud, a deep pit was formed. After a few punches, he quickly buried the bonfire and the roasted wild boar to prevent the smoke from the fire from attracting the pursuers. Yan Juexing looked at the dazed third brother Xan and asked, "What's your name? What cultivator are you?" "Spirit Fang Valley's third brother Xan." Third brother Xian replied dully. Yan Juexing confirmed and asked, "Your Spirit Fang Valley's Lu Yanqing's disciple, third brother Xan?" "Yes." Third brother Xian replied. After getting confirmation, Yan Juexing muttered to himself. His face gradually revealed an expression of surprise and he muttered to himself, "The heavens really don't want me to die." Then he squinted his eyes as if he remembered something and said indifferently, "Dig out both your eyes." Third brother Xan heard this and without hesitation, he stuck 2 fingers towards his eyes. Just when he was about to touch his eyeballs, Yan Juexing suddenly said, "Stop." After that, he carried out a few more tests and confirmed that he really had control over third brother Xian. Only then did he relax. Previously he was afraid of Yu Qianqiu, so he couldn't help but doubt his magic eye ecstasy art. So he had to test it out first before he could be at ease. After testing it out, he didn't dare to dawdle anymore. Danger could come at any time. Waking third brother Xan up from his daze, he conveyed his order and said, "Let's go." Third brother Xan quickly rose into the sky while Yan Juexing went into the dense forest. The 2 of them, one in the sky and one in the forest, maintained the same speed as they quickly headed towards Spirit Fang Valley. In the end, not long after, third brother Xian discovered the pursuers before Yan Juexing with his cultivation at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Yan Juexing quickly hid in the dense forest while third brother Xan stopped in the sky. He turned around and shouted to the others, "Who are you? Why are you chasing me?" The 5 cultivators at the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage obviously knew him. They all cupped their hands and one of the leaders answered, "So it's Senior Xan from Spirit Fang Valley. It's a misunderstanding. We are the disciples of the World Chamber of Commerce. We were ordered to hunt down Yan Juexing who caused trouble in Cornucopia. Senior, did you see any suspicious people passing by?" "Hunt down Yan Juexing? What trouble did he cause?" Third brother Xan said curiously, I even met him and had a few words with him. I didn't see any signs of him running away. Senior, you saw Yan Juexing before? The man's eyes lit up. He cupped his hands and said, "Can you tell me which direction he went?" "I can tell you, but don't talk about hunting. Be careful, Bing Qingzi won't let you go." Third brother Xan pointed to the left and said, "He went in that direction. When you see him, talk nicely. Fighting will hurt the harmony." After knowing where Yan Juexing went, they didn't want to talk to him anymore. The leader smiled and said perfunctorily, "We will remember. We won't disturb you anymore." The five of them quickly turned to the left. After watching them go far away, third brother Xn set off again in the direction of Spirit Fang Valley. Yan Juexing emerged from his hiding place and followed closely in the dense forest. After the five of them left, they quickly sent a message to Cornucopia. The pursuers of the World Chamber of Commerce quickly gathered in the direction pointed by third brother Xn. Such a big movement naturally couldn't be hidden from the eyes of all the forces. It immediately attracted everyone to chase in that direction. Chapter 651. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in a hurry, bumped into several groups of people along the way, but they were all sent away by third Xan. He should be happy to pass the test easily, but Yan Juexing got angrier the more he thought about it. Whenever he thought of Yu Qianqiu, he would gnash his teeth in hatred. Different from Yu Qianqiu's ostentatious style of doing things, Yan Juexing always wanted to develop in a low-key manner, but there was someone who didn't let him have his way. From the beginning in the 100 Flowers Valley until now, as long as he met Yu Qianqiu, that guy would force him to become famous together with him. Now, one of them was the world's #1 expert below the spirit-severing stage, who had killed countless people, and he had offended everyone. The other one was an absolutely dangerous person with a peerless skill, who was coveted by many people. The two juniors from the Chinese cultivation world were famous in the world together. The difference was that the former had found a strong backer, and no one dared to touch him openly for the time being. The latter was unlucky. He only had Bing Qingzi as his backer, so he was easier to bully. Naturally, people would find trouble with him first. Yan Juexing really couldn't figure it out. Regardless of whether they were enemies or not, both of them were outstanding figures of the new generation in the cultivation world. Didn't that guy know that the tallest tree in the forest would be blown away by the wind? Before he had the ability to protect himself, it was simply courting death to face so many experts with such great fanfare. Even if he had a backer, he couldn't rely on him for a lifetime, right? It was a complete country bumpkin, a local tycoon, and a nouveau riche. It was a miracle that he didn't die today. This was Yan Juexing's evaluation of Yu Qianqiu. However, what he didn't reflect on was that since the day he was born in the Chinese cultivation world, he was destined to have a height and starting point that many cultivators couldn't reach in their lifetime. His grandfather was the leader of the #1 sect in the Chinese cultivation world of diabolism. His maternal grandfather was the leader of the #1 sect in the righteous path. He also had the halo of the young palace master of the 100 Flowers Palace. When others were still struggling in the Ruoshui River for basic living conditions, he was already standing on the beautiful mountain peak. He didn't even want to look at it. Instead, he kept a low profile and looked around at the crowd that had already climbed ashore, to see who could be of use to him. This was what he meant by being low-key. With a high-profile identity and qualifications, it was easy for him to say that he was low-key. But what did Yu Qianqiu have at that time? There was nothing. Living in the cultivation world where the strong preyed on the weak, not to mention dignity, they didn't even have the right to ensure their own survival. Ever since he joined Ong Kwangtsung, he had been in constant danger of being devoured. If you accidentally said something wrong, even if you revealed a look that made others unhappy, they could take your life. This was something that could happen in an instant. Moreover, if he died, he wouldn't even have the chance to show himself. He wouldn't even have the right to bury his head and keep a low profile. It was not easy for him to join supporting Immortal Island, but there were always people who wanted to harm him. He did the lowliest and most despised job. He was already so low-key that he couldn't be any more low-key. He almost dug a hole to bury himself alive, but he was still in a precarious situation. In the end, he was forced to abandon his dignity as a man and knelt down to beg for help for the sake of some spiritual herb seeds that could help him turn over a new leaf. It didn't matter if he lost his face, but he still owed a favor until now. A person of noble birth like Yan Juexing would never be able to understand the pain of a small fry like Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu sometimes looked back at the few women he met along the way. Bai Suzhen had never looked at him differently because of the change in his status. She had always helped him unreservedly. When he was tired, she was a trustworthy harbor that he could rely on. Furong also wouldn't look down on him because of his lowly status. On the contrary, from the moment the two of them met, he started to bully her. Yu Qianqiu was the only pure person left in this world until now. She treated his words as an imperial edict and did whatever he told her to do without any consideration. Yu Qianqiu couldn't imagine how guilty he would feel if he hurt her. As a result, Yu Qianqiu was in fear and trepidation. He was afraid that this girl would suffer even the slightest grievance. Whatever she wanted, Yu Qianqiu would satisfy it at all costs and put in all his effort to protect her. In fact, Furong wouldn't make any excessive requests of him. With the existence of these two women, Yu Qianqiu's heart was incomparably strong. He had the confidence to face any difficulties. Even if his final outcome was to be beaten into a cripple with 4 limbs missing, he did not lose everything. He still had the most precious thing. He had no reason to believe that these two women would still wholeheartedly accompany and take care of him for the rest of his life. They could stand the test of time. Even if he had the backing of the world's #1 expert by Changchun, it wasn't as reassuring as these two women's soft shoulders. As for the other women, if he didn't have the corresponding strength to conquer them, would they fall in love with a little cultivator who was at the mercy of others? Yu Qianqiu believed that they were also good women. However, he subconsciously didn't dare to think too deeply about it. He just constantly gave himself confidence that they were also very good women. They were very good to him, very good. Yu Qianqiu was a small character struggling in the endless weak waters of the cultivation world. He struggled to stay alive in the endless weak waters of the cultivation world. When he finally climbed ashore and wanted to rest, he found that there were ferocious beasts eyeing him covetously. A good person had become a rare animal. There were only 2 paths for him to choose. He could either live with his tail between his legs like most people, or he could risk his life to stand out and fight for his own rights. He chose the latter without any hesitation. Yan Zhuixing had the capital to be low-key, but Yu Qianqiu didn't. The latter wanted to quickly stand out and get rid of the precarious situation, so he could only prepare to be low-key and be a high-profile person. When his crazy methods started to make people afraid, he was no longer a small cultivator that everyone could bully. At the very least, those cultivators at the same level as him didn't dare to provoke him anymore. His reputation rose, and many big figures who couldn't come into contact with him in the past began to notice his existence and reached out to recruit him. Yan Zhuixing had also noticed him at that time and wanted to take him in for his own use. Until now, Yu Qianqiu's reputation in the various countries could be said to be notorious. However, he still managed to carve out a path of blood and successfully protected himself. At the very least, other than the top soul formation experts in the cultivation world, cultivators below the soul formation stage didn't dare to easily find trouble with him. This was the difference between Yan Zhuixing, who was born with a noble background and acted low-key, and Yu Qianqiu, who was born with a grassroots background and acted high-key. It was because everyone's starting point was different. There was no such thing as country bumpkin, local tycoon, or nouveau riche. At the end of the day, everyone wanted to succeed by hook or by crook. There were also many people who died in Yan Zhuixing's hands. Different paths led to the same goal, and it all depended on who won in the end. Swoosh! The giant silver sword blocked in front of Bing Qingzi and his disciple who were trying to leave the cornucopia. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. It seemed that when Lan Feng was starting to stand up for Yu Qianqiu, Pei Fong and the other two looked at each other and laughed in their hearts. It couldn't be better to directly get rid of Bing Qingzi through Wen Lanfeng's hands. Yu Qianqiu was also full of excitement. He didn't kill Yan Zhuixing, but it was also good to kill his backer. This guy's thinking was very simple. As long as it was his opponent's power, he would not let it go if he could eradicate it. The weaker the opponent, the stronger he would be. Bing Qingzi secretly cursed. It would probably be hard for him to have a good ending today. He turned to stare at Wen Lanfeng and said, "Wen Lanfeng, I have no enmity with you. What do you mean by this?" Wen Lanfeng's body began to emit a threatening aura. His long hair gradually fluttered behind him. He stared at Bing Qingzi ruthlessly and said indifferently, "What do I mean? Do I still need to explain?" The spirit-severing stage experts in the air retreated one after another. Once these two guys started fighting, the remaining power would be very frightening and could easily harm the innocent. Bing Qingzi also knew that he was no match for Wen Lanfeng. It was meaningless for him to risk his life. He looked at Lu Yanqing, who was wearing a gauze hat, and said, "Miss Lu, my ice palace has always been very respectful to Spirit Fang Valley. Every year we would send disciples to collect snow spirit grass and offer it. I hope Miss Lu can plead for this old man from Brother Wen on account of our many years of friendship. He was flexible and good at finding people. He found Wen Lanfeng's nemesis in an instant. As a result, Wen Lanfeng's threatening aura weakened a little before Lu Yanqing opened her mouth. Pei Fong and the others frowned at the sight. Lu Yanqing was silent for a while. She tilted her head to look at Wen Lanfeng and sighed slightly. Does everything need to be solved by fighting and killing? Although her words didn't sound like she was pleading for Bing Qingzi, it was no different from stopping Wen Lanfeng from fighting. In the end, Wen Lanfeng didn't say a word. The giant silver sword whooshed back into his storage bag. Bing Qingzi cupped his hands at Wen Lanfeng and said, "Thank you for your mercy, Brother Wen." Then he cupped his hands at Lu Yanqing and said, "I will remember Miss Lu's kindness. As long as the Ice Palace is here, if Spirit Fang Valley encounters any trouble, the Ice Palace will definitely do its best to help. Farewell." The master and disciple quickly flew away. When Lanfeng looked at Nongzhu and Yu Qianshou apologetically, seemingly hoping that they would understand. Nongzhu was speechless, but there was nothing she could do. She couldn't stop Bing Qingzi. Everyone didn't expect that a big battle would be resolved by Lu Yanqing's words. Yu Qianshou was both angry and amused. He didn't expect Lu Yanqing's words to have such a great influence on Wen Lanfeng. Wen Lanfeng didn't think that at this point, everyone's position was already clear. Those who were enemies couldn't be let go. Maybe people will accept Lu Yanqing's feelings, but they won't necessarily accept your Wen Lanfeng's feelings, because everyone knows that you and I, Yu Qianshou, are on the same side, but I, Yu Qianshou, and Yan Zhuixing are sworn enemies. For the first time, Yu Qianshou had the idea of stripping Lu Yanqing naked and throwing her on the bed to vent his anger. This woman was too bullshit. If you don't know anything, don't get involved. In the cultivation world, if problems could be solved by talking nicely, then everyone would ask you to be the peacemaker. What's the point of fighting? What's the point of fighting? What's the point of fighting? There were some words that had to be said. Yu Qianshou stared at Lu Yanqing and said in a low voice, "Senior Lu's compassion is really admirable, but I have a word of advice for you. You let the Ice Palace people go today, but if they hurt Spirit Fang Valley in the future, I hope you won't regret it." Yu Qianshou, stop it. Nongzhu frowned and stopped him. When Lanfeng smiled apologetically and said, "Yu Qianshou, I'll let it go this time. Next time, you're too kind, senior." Yu Qianshou waved his hand to interrupt him and said indifferently, "It's better to rely on yourself than on others. I won't bother you next time. I just hope Senior Wen and Senior Lu can fulfill their promise." Chapter 652. When Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing were speechless. Everyone could tell that when Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing were drawing a clear line. Everyone felt it was incredible. Yu Qianshou was really bold. He dared to speak to Wen Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing in such a tone. Didn't he know that without Wen Lanfeng's protection, there were too many people here who wanted his life? However, the two people involved were well aware that Yu Qianshou was fully qualified to speak to them like this because of his identity as Bai Changchun's disciple. On the contrary, the two dared not speak too harshly to Yu Qianshou. Even if Lu Yanqing was the most beautiful woman in the world, she still felt a lingering fear when she thought of the terrifying figure behind Yu Qianshou. That old man wouldn't care how beautiful you were, and he wouldn't show mercy to you just because you were a girl. No matter how beautiful you were, in his eyes, you were just a bag of stinky skin. If you made him unhappy, he would directly consider whether you still had the need to live. It was a completely inhuman way of thinking, and the way he dealt with things was frighteningly direct. When Lanfeng nodded silently and said, "Don't worry, I will do what I promised you." Yu Qianshou turned to Nongzhu and said, "Let's go. Take them with us." The two people he was referring to were Furong and Zi. "You." Nongzhu shook her head, not knowing what to say, then nodded. The two were just about to leave when they suddenly heard someone shout, "Stop." The two looked back and saw Hu Changshou flash out. He cupped his hands to Wen Lanfeng and said, "Brother Wen, this kid's words were too arrogant. He didn't put you in his eyes. There's something I'd like to ask Brother Wen about. Does this brat mean that he has nothing to do with Brother Wen from now on?" When Lanfeng suddenly looked at Hu Changshou, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Hu Changshou, what do you want to say?" "I won't lie in front of Brother Wen." Hu Changshou stared coldly at Yu Qianshou and said, "If he really has nothing to do with Brother Wen, I want to settle the score with him for killing my Yun Palace disciple. If I still have a close relationship with Brother Wen, then I have no choice but to give Brother Wen face and let this matter drop." At this time, when Lanfeng naturally wanted to support Yu Qianshou, but who knew that before he could speak? But he heard Nongzhu shout, "Wen Lanfeng, from now on, Yu Qianqiu has nothing to do with you." Wen Lanfeng looked back and swallowed the words he was about to say. Nongzhu sneered arrogantly and said, "I'd like to see who dares to hurt Yu Qianqiu." He was also furious. These people really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. They thought that Yu Qianqiu could be trampled upon after leaving Wen Lanfeng. At this time, if he didn't stand out, then he would have come here in vain. Otherwise, there was no need for him to beg for Bai Changchun's jade pendant. Wasn't it just a precaution? Good, very good. Wu Changshou clapped his hands and smiled. With Nongzhu's words, I can rest assured. A black shadow flashed to his side. Yin Baikong, dressed in a black robe, stood out and said with a dark face, "Since you have nothing to do with Brother Wen Yu Qianqiu, it's time to settle our debt." Wu Changshou glanced at him and chuckled. "I wonder what debt this kid owes you that it's worth Brother Yin to come personally?" "The 7 treasures pill." Yin Baikong said with a dark face, "This kid sold the 7 treasures pill to me, of course I have to look for him." Before the incident, he had sent people to look for Niu Yid, hoping to discuss the next batch of limit-breaking pills and 7 treasures pill. Unfortunately, a few days had passed and not even a shadow of Niu Yid was seen. In addition to the 7 treasures pill incident, Yin Baikong had a faint feeling that something was wrong. He even suspected that he had fallen into someone's trap. If this matter was not resolved, the World Commerce Association would be in big trouble. Everyone was in an uproar. Who would have thought that the 7 treasures pill was sold to Yin Baikong by Yu Qianqiu? Wasn't it refined by Niu Yid? In reality, the matter of the 7 treasures pill incident was only known to the higher-ups of various parties. The news had not been spread. After all, the cause of the incident was still unclear. "It's really a broken drum and a messed-up person beating." Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, "Yin Baikong, what does the 7 treasures pill have to do with me? I obviously didn't want to sell it to you, but you forcefully bought it from me. Moreover, this was clearly a transaction between you and Niu Yid. I didn't earn a single spirit stone, I was only an errand boy. I don't know and I don't want to know what's wrong with the 7 treasures pill. If there's a problem, look for Niu Yid, don't look for me." Yin Baikong said with a cold expression, "If I can find Niu Yid, I won't look for you. Since you're involved in this matter, don't think of getting away so easily. Think of a way to help me find Niu Yid." At this moment, Ziyi flew over together with Hibiscus. It was Nongzhu who called the two of them over. Yu Qianqiu was startled, and the haze on his face immediately turned into a smile. He held Hibiscus's hand and said, "What are you doing here? Did someone bully you again?" Hibiscus looked around with hatred in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and turned back to Yin Baikong. "If you can't find Niu Yid, don't come to me to vent your anger." Yin Baikong opened his mouth when he saw Hibiscus's hateful gaze, but he couldn't say anything. Wu Changshou followed Yin Baikong's gaze in confusion. Although this woman's appearance was not bad, it wasn't enough to make this old pervert. His eyes inadvertently caught a glimpse of the black cloud pattern jade pendant on Hibiscus's waist. Wu Changshou's pupils suddenly shrank, especially the word "Bai" on it. His mouth slowly opened as he became dumbstruck. He finally understood Yin Baikong's feelings. The 2 top experts who wanted to take this opportunity to retaliate were instantly speechless. It was indeed not a good thing for a group of soul formation experts to have such sharp eyes. When everyone's eyes touched the jade pendant on Hibiscus's waist, they couldn't take their eyes off it. Their faces were filled with disbelief. It seemed like they had seen this thing before. When Lanfeng and Lu Yanqing looked at each other speechlessly. When Lanfeng in particular was a little depressed. Even if he personally showed up, he wouldn't be as deterrent as Bai Changchun's jade pendant. The group of cultivators watching from below couldn't figure out what was happening up there. Why did they all become mute? Although the group of soul formation experts gradually came back to their senses, their eyes were filled with doubt. First, they doubted Hibiscus's identity. Second, when they saw Yu Qianqiu holding her hand, they doubted the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and her. Nongzhu revealed a sarcastic expression. Sure enough, evil people needed to be tempered by evil people. If it wasn't for Bai Changchun's iron-blooded methods, the cultivation world would have already turned upside down. Pei Fong, with a face full of fat, swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Suddenly, with a swoosh sound, he rushed between the 2 sides. The blue-faced demon knife quickly appeared in his hand and said to the people behind him in a righteous manner, "Brother Nongzhu, if you want to leave, go ahead. I Pei Fong am here. If anyone dares to stop you, they will have to go through me first." After saying that, he hurriedly shouted to Ouyangda and Qi Jiujuan, Two brothers, quickly come and help me. The two behind him heard this and quickly flashed over. In the blink of an eye, one of them wore the deadly claws while the other used the sovereign descending ruler to wait for the enemy. The three of them stared at Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho like tigers watching their prey. They seemed to want to escort Nongzhu and the others away at all costs. The group of soul formation experts rolled their eyes. They had seen shameless people, but they had never seen someone as shameless as Fatty Pei. Moreover, there were two who were willing to be shameless with him. Did these three guys have the qualities of the top 10 experts? Even if they wanted to flatter, they shouldn't do it like this. They have that jade pendant, do they still need you to protect them? Would Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho dare to act recklessly? The most depressed ones were Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho. The two of them almost fainted from anger. Did we say that we were going to fight? These three guys actually took advantage of this situation to play this trick. It was fine if they wanted to flatter, but they also had the suspicion of confusing the public. It was as if the two of them were the murderers, and the three of them were sacrificing themselves to save the others. They were simply not afraid of making things worse. Imagine if the scene of this confrontation reached by Changchun's ears, that terrifying guy wouldn't even listen to an explanation. Once there was a misunderstanding, someone might die. They could be angry, but Pei Fong didn't care that much. It was not easy to come across such a good opportunity. If he didn't seize it, he would be letting himself down. As for whether or not someone would die, Pei Fong couldn't wait for someone to die, the more the better. It would be best if both Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho were dead. Furong didn't really understand the severity of the situation, but seeing that there were people who came to help at the critical moment, she immediately had a good impression of them. She weakly asked Yu Qianqiu, "That fatty and the other two are your friends? They're so nice." The moment these words came out, Pei Fong and the other two were immediately full of energy. Pei Fong in particular was grinning so widely that he couldn't even close his mouth. The fat on his face trembled as he turned around and said with a flattering smile, "He's a friend, a friend. From the first time I met Brother Yu, I've treated him as a bosom friend. If Brother Yu has any trouble in the future, don't hesitate to look for me. Alright, I am Pei Fong." Pei Fong, Senior Pei. Furong smiled like a flower and nodded, "I will remember you." Qi Jiujuan turned his head and said with a warm smile, "I am Qi Jiujuan." Ouyangde turned his head and said with an even more sincere smile, "I am Ouyangde." Furong solemnly nodded and said, "Senior Qi, Senior Ouyang." Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched as he scratched his head. He didn't want to spoil Furong's mood. The greetings made the three of them so happy that they almost couldn't find the edge. Especially Pei Fong, he kept nodding his head happily and didn't seem to have any intention of confronting others. He was certain that the two behind him wouldn't dare to make a move. In the end, Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho were so angry that they almost vomited blood. It turned out that the two of them were the villains and these three were trying their best to reap benefits. However, they didn't dare to lose their temper at this time for fear of scaring the girl. Shameless. A group of soul formation stage lords looked down on these three fellows. They were too shameless. Ziyi could be considered as someone with some experience. She naturally knew who these people were. They were all top figures in the cultivation world. She also understood that it was all because of the jade pendant on Furong's waist. Thus, her admiration for Senior Bai soared again, and at the same time she was extremely envious of Furong. The group of cultivators who didn't know what was going on were completely confused. This scene was too strange. However, they weren't stupid. This woman was able to scare 5 late-stage spirit-severing experts at the same time, so her background was definitely not simple. Thus, everyone kept guessing Furong's background in their hearts. Yi Cheng, who was mixed in the crowd, was even more dumbfounded. He even suspected that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Chapter 653. Ignore them, let's go. Nongzhu waved her hand disdainfully. She didn't want to waste any more time with these shameless people. The 4 of them flew towards the passage of the treasure basin. The sky was quiet. Hu Changsho and Yin Baikong, who were shouting happily just now, remained silent as they watched them leave. Just as the 4 of them arrived at the passage of the treasure basin and were about to leave, a shrill laughter came from above, causing them to stop. Not only them but everyone in the cornucopia also raised their heads to look at the sky. Sure enough, there is a group of soul-forming cultivators. Looks like this is the place. A man in a green robe was muttering to himself as he stared at the ground with his arms crossed. Although his voice was soft, it was as clear as a thread into the ears of the people below. Logically speaking, the treasure basin was protected by a protective formation. Only the people inside could see what was happening outside, while the people outside could only see the clouds and mist below. However, the newcomer was able to discover a group of soul-forming cultivators, which was not simple at all. Yin Baikong, who was already angry, neglected this point. Instead, he flew into a rage and said, "Who is sneakily standing up there?" The newcomer was none other than the emissary from the underworld, Lu Mei, who was instructed by Yu Ji. Lu Mei, who was in the sky, was startled. Then he laughed in a shrill voice and said, "Are you talking to me? How arrogant. Let me see who it is." In fact, he didn't see the people below, but the people of the underworld were very sensitive to the strength of human auras in the mortal world. Moreover, the cultivation of the people below had not reached the level where they could hide their auras, so he was able to determine who it was from above. The man in the green robe suddenly turned into a ball of green light and effortlessly passed through the protective formation. Based on the sound, he floated in front of Yin Baikong and suddenly transformed back into his human form. A pair of green eyebrows slightly raised, and his small eyes looked up and down at Yin Baikong with disdain. Then he said in a shrill voice, "Were you the one who talked big to me just now?" Everyone was startled by him and quickly backed away. Especially Pei Fong and the other two who just ran out, they quickly moved away. One had to know that the cornucopia's defensive formation was personally set up by Yin Baikong, a late-stage deity transformation expert. Its defensive power was exceptionally strong, and even if an expert of Pei Fong's level were to force his way in, he would still cause quite a commotion. And this green-robed man who suddenly appeared actually broke in without a sound and effortlessly. In particular, the spell that could turn one's entire body into a ball of green light was something that he had never seen before. It was extremely strange. The most disturbing thing was that even with everyone's cultivation, they couldn't sense any life from this person. It was as if the person standing in front of them was a living dead. Coupled with a pair of green eyebrows and a deathly pale complexion, it gave off a feeling of extreme danger. Yin Baikong was startled and immediately calmed down from his previous anger. His body flashed and he quickly moved a safe distance away. He then cupped his hands and asked, "May I know who you are and what brings you here?" Green Eyebrows laughed and said, "How dare you? I asked you a question but you dare not to answer. I will ask you again, were you the one who was boasting shamelessly in front of me just now?" Yin Baikong's heart skipped a beat, but he still squeezed out a smile and cupped his hands, saying, "It was a misunderstanding just now. I didn't know you were an esteemed guest, so please forgive me for not going out to greet you." Since he couldn't figure out the other party's background, he could only feel wronged. It was better than losing his life. "It seems like you are a tactful person. It won't be difficult for me to forgive you." Green Eyebrows crossed his arms in front of his chest, and indifferently swept his gaze across the crowd, as if he was looking at a group of ants that he could trample at will. His gaze finally landed on Yin Baikong and he arrogantly said, "Kneel down and kowtow to apologize and I can spare your life." Once these words were spoken, the crowd was in an uproar. Someone actually wanted Yin Baikong to kowtow? The group of deity transformation experts looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know where this monster came from, but he was a bit too arrogant. The gloating expression on Pei Fong's face suddenly disappeared, and he exchanged glances with Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang Da, their eyes filled with seriousness. It was true that they couldn't wait for Yin Baikong to die, but Yin Baikong was, after all, one of the top 10 experts on the same level as them. Normally, no matter how much they targeted Yin Baikong, they wouldn't use such a method to humiliate him. If Yin Baikong really knelt down and kowtowed, it wouldn't just be him losing face but the top 10 experts as well. How would the cultivators of the world view the so-called top 10 experts in the future? At the entrance of the passage, Yu Qianqiu gave Nongzhu a questioning look, hoping to get an answer from the knowledgeable Nongzhu. In the end, Nongzhu slightly shook her head and transmitted her voice, "I have never seen such a person. I'm afraid Yin Baikong is out of luck." At this moment, even if Yu Qianqiu racked his brains, he wouldn't be able to think that this strange person was lured out by his deeds. Yin Baikong's expression greatly changed. If this was a place with no one around and he was forced into a corner, he might have compromised in order to save his life. But where was this place? This was the cornucopia of the World Commerce's headquarters. His disciples and grand disciples were watching from below. How could he kneel? If he really was humiliated and knelt in front of everyone, even if he obtained the entire world in the future, he would never be able to raise his head. If he was an ordinary cultivator, then it wouldn't matter, but he was one of the top 10 experts. There were different types of humiliation, and some humiliation was more difficult to bear than death for experts. Who are you? Aren't you being a little too overbearing? Yin Baikong asked with an ashen face. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he had today. Why did bad things happen one after another? A mere mortal doesn't have the right to ask who I am. Lu Mei's tone was cold and threatening. I'll give you one last chance, are you going to kneel or not? An icy aura slowly spread out, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet. He was indeed angry. In the underworld, he knelt in front of a woman every day, so he already had nowhere to vent his anger. He didn't expect that in the human world, a mortal cultivator would actually dare to contradict him. Immediately, killing intent spread in his heart. A mere mortal? Yin Baikong's pupils shrank. From the other party's aura, he sensed an aura similar to Niu Yu's, but it didn't seem to be as strong as Niu Yu's. He immediately asked, could it be that you're from the immortal world? I also have a friend in the immortal world called Niu Yu, do you know him? When a person was forced into a desperate situation, no matter what method he had, he would always try it. The moment these words came out, it could be said that everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned. Niu Yu was actually from the immortal world? Everyone thought of Niu Yu's incomparably arrogant actions and immediately came to a realization. So he was from the immortal world. No wonder such a powerful expert suddenly appeared. No one knew his origin. However, everyone was more or less suspecting whether Yin Baikong's words were true or not. Nong Zhu's face kept twitching. She stiffly turned around and rolled her dead fish eyes. She transmitted her voice to Yu Qianqiu. Kid, what nonsense did you tell Yin Baikong to actually make him say such nonsense? Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a sluggish expression. He really didn't know what to say. He could only silently say in his heart, Brother Yin, take care. Lu Yanqing, who was in the air, stared at him with a complicated gaze. Lu Mei was slightly startled when she heard this. She asked in surprise, you have a friend in the immortal world? What does Niu Yu do? The immortal world had always been in contact with the underworld. However, his position and cultivation in the underworld wasn't high. He was just a dispensable clown under Madame Heiqi's feet. He wasn't familiar with the people in the immortal world at all. If this person's friend was someone important in the immortal world, then he wouldn't be able to provoke them. Even if he ran back to the underworld, they could still come to the immortal world to deal with him. Madame Heiqi wouldn't offend a big shot in the immortal world for a clown like him. If that happened, she would kick him away like a piece of trash, without the slightest bit of mercy. Seeing that the opponent's aura was slightly weakened, Yin Baikong cupped his hands and smiled. My friend is the immortal world's emissary. Yu Qianqiu almost couldn't hold back his laughter when he heard this. Nong Zhu glanced at him. She finally knew who this kid was pretending to be. It turned out that he was the emissary he mentioned before. Immortal world's emissary? Lu Mei's face was full of suspicion. The immortal world's emissary who goes to and from the immortal ascension stage in the human world? Yin Baikong's eyes lit up. It seemed that Niu Yu didn't lie to him. There really was such a person in the immortal world. He immediately cupped his hands and smiled. That's right. He's the immortal world's emissary who goes to and from the immortal ascension stage in the human world. Lu Mei's pale face darkened. He said in a gloomy tone, You dare to trick me? You actually used an emissary from the immortal world to fool me. He might not dare to provoke someone with a bit of status in the immortal world, but he wouldn't put a lowly immortal in his eyes. No matter how insignificant he was in the underworld, he was still a small character who had accompanied the dignified Madame Heiqi for a long time. Not everyone would dare to touch him when he went out. Not to mention this, his cultivation level was one level higher than that lousy emissary. Yin Baikong was shocked. He knew that he had overreached himself. He raised his hand in a panic, wanting to apologize. Who knew that Lu Mei would shout, I gave you a chance to live but you didn't want it. You dare to trick me? Hand over your life. Yin Baikong was indeed someone who had been on the battlefield for a long time. Once he heard this, he knew that there was no room for negotiation. Without hesitation, he teleported and disappeared on the spot. However, Lu Mei disappeared almost at the same time. Bang! A loud sound came from the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Two people appeared at the edge of the defensive formation at the same time. From the looks of it, it seemed like Yin Baikong wanted to teleport away, but his escape route was blocked by the other party. Before anyone could clearly see what was going on, they only saw a green light and a white light violently colliding. The powerful shockwave caused the spirit-severing experts in the air to fall down one after another. The airflow stirred up the dust, making everyone unable to open their eyes. The surrounding shops collapsed on the spot. Some of the Foundation establishment cultivators couldn't even stand steadily and were directly pushed to the ground by the strong airflow that was blowing towards them. Chapter 654. Nong Zhu's figure flashed and appeared in front of them. She quickly pushed out a wall of light with one palm, protecting the three people behind her. The sandstorm and debris were like shuttles, smashing against the wall of light with a pitter-patter. Even with Nong Zhu's help, Yu Qianqiu still subconsciously pulled Farong behind him and stared at the sky with a solemn expression. The green light and white light violently collided and separated. However, the green light remained stationary in the air, while the white light was quickly knocked back as if it had hit an iron wall. As soon as it was knocked back, the white light disappeared and a human figure was smashed down with a swoosh. Bang! The ground shook violently and in an instant, a deep pit was smashed out of the collapsed walls. A few cultivators with low cultivation were unable to dodge in time and were smashed into the pit. After letting out a miserable scream, there was no reaction. The green light in the air revealed its true form. Lu Mei stared at the ground and laughed cruelly. "Reckless thing, you still want to escape in front of me." Cough cough. A series of violent coughs came from the deep pit, and the coughs were heart-wrenching. Suddenly the coughs stopped, and the white light once again shone from the deep pit. A powerful aura rapidly rotated and spread out from the deep pit like a storm. The surrounding broken bricks and stones were swept away as if they were dry weeds and rotten wood. Before the crowd could react, a black figure with a dazzling white light quickly escaped from the deep pit. It seemed as if it wanted to split the void, emitting a dazzling light that pierced through the sky. Its target was Lu Mei, who was in the air. The onlookers were overwhelmed with emotions. Yin Baikong obviously knew that he couldn't escape, so he took the initiative to launch a powerful attack. Among the cultivators watching from below, there might have been many who scoffed at Yin Baikong's action of escaping. But now, who would dare to say that Yin Baikong, one of the top 10 experts in the world, was a coward who ran away? Xiao. The black figure with the cone-shaped white light emitted an ear-piercing sound of breaking through the air. It was like a divine arrow that was shot from a bow, breaking through thousands of kilograms. Everyone below had their hearts in their throats as they stared at Yin Baikong's all-out attack with wide eyes. Whether they had a grudge against him or not, they all hoped that he could defeat the enemy in one strike. "How dare you!" Lu Mei shouted in a shrill voice. With a swoosh, he charged towards the incoming white light. With a yes sound, he raised a huge palm shadow and slammed it down. Bang! The air exploded, the airflow rippled, and visible patterns spread out. The white light was instantly annihilated, and a black shadow crashed down at an even faster speed than before. More than half of the shops in the treasure basin collapsed in an instant. Bang! The ground shook and an even larger pit appeared. It's over. Yin Baikong is finished. This thought suddenly popped up in everyone's mind. It was quiet all around. Everyone stared at the newly created pit without blinking. There was no movement inside. Was he dead? The shrill laughter rose again. Green Eyebrows glanced at the crowd below and said, "Did you see that? This is the consequence of being disrespectful to me." Cough cough. The sudden sound of coughing interrupted his wild laughter. Green Eyebrows couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Staring at the figure crawling up from the deep pit below, he clicked his tongue and said, "Old thing, you're really tough. You're actually not dead yet?" Inside the deep pit, the black-robed Yin Baikong lowered his head and dragged his sword. He slowly walked out with heavy steps, and silently stood at the edge of the deep pit with his sword in hand. His black robe was already tattered and covered in dust. Blood could be seen flowing out from the wound underneath. Although he was old, his neatly combed hair was now loose and messy. Mixed with the dust, it was as messy as weeds on the roadside. Ah. He slowly raised his head, and intermittent sounds came from his throat. Yin Baikong stubbornly stared at the sky. His eyes were still bright and full of expression. Suddenly, his chest heaved up and down and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he continued to stare at the sky, unwilling to lower his head. "Master!" Two cries of alarm could be heard. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong teleported over with their swords in hand. They stretched out their hands to support Yin Baikong's arm. "Don't touch me, I can't fall yet. I don't need anyone to support me." Yin Baikong shouted, and the two disciples' hands froze in fear. Green Eyebrows, who was crossing his arms in the air, shook his head and said with a mocking expression, "Even if he's not dead, he's not far from it. Is this your disciple? Old thing, this lord is being kind and will give you some time. If you have any last words, hurry up and say them." Ah! Sharp laughter echoed in the air. The resentment that had been suppressed for so long in the netherworld had finally found a place to vent, and he laughed very happily. It felt so good to be able to control the life and death of others at any time. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong stared at the sky with faces full of anger. Yin Baikong also revealed a sinister expression, but when he turned around and looked at the two accompanying disciples, he nodded his head with a gratified expression. These two disciples were not taken in for nothing. They still dared to stand out in such a dangerous moment. "You two back down, this has nothing to do with you," Yin Baikong said in a deep voice. "Master." Jing Yuankong's face was full of anxiety. Sikongju shook his head with a bitter smile. "If anything happens to Master, even though the world is big, where can we brothers retreat to?" What he said was the truth. The two brothers had worked for Yin Baikong and had offended countless people. If Yin Baikong died, how could others spare them? Yin Baikong's eyes turned scarlet red, and he stared at Pei Fong, who was in the crowd, and shouted angrily, "Fatty Pei, you and I have fought for a lifetime, why don't we put an end to it today? Do you dare to come out and fight me?" Pei Fong was speechless after being called out. He scratched his fat face and said with a bitter smile, "Brother Yin, why do you have to do this? Look at the situation now. Say it, will you fight or not?" Yin Baikong roared. "I admit defeat." Pei Fong shrugged his shoulders helplessly and said with a bitter face, "I know what you want to say. Don't worry. As long as your two disciples don't go against me in the future, I won't find trouble with them. As long as they don't take the initiative to cause trouble, I won't let others find trouble with them. Brother Yin, are you satisfied now?" Yin Baikong chuckled and said, "Fatty Pei, looks like you won't have a chance to win against me in this lifetime. If you don't accept it, I'll wait for you in the next life." Damn it. Pei Fong couldn't help but curse. He scratched his fat face and said, "Fine, if there's a chance in the next life, we'll fight again. This life is yours." Ah! Yin Baikong laughed wildly. After hearing the conversation between the two, the crowd couldn't help but sigh. Although they all knew that Yin Baikong didn't have a true friend in this lifetime, no one would have thought that the person he would entrust his funeral to was the enemy he had been fighting with for a lifetime. There was a good saying, the person who understood you the most was your enemy. After laughing wildly, Yin Baikong turned to his two disciples and said with a smile, "If you still have me as your master in your heart, don't let my Yin family's bloodline end. As for the World Commerce Chamber, you won't be able to keep it. Let go when you need to. Otherwise, if Fatty Pei becomes jealous, his words will be treated as farts." Pei Fong rolled his eyes and didn't retort. At this time he couldn't be bothered to argue with him. "Are you guys done talking?" Lu Mei, who was floating in the air with his arms crossed, was getting impatient. "Get out of the way." Yin Baikong shouted at his two disciples. Sikongju and Jing Yuankong were still hesitant, but when they saw their master's angry glare, they bit their lips and bowed, then resolutely turned around and left. Human fire. A commotion suddenly broke out in the surroundings. Yin Baikong straightened his back, his whole body was burning with a scorching white flame, and a suffocating aura slowly spread in all directions. Meanwhile, Yin Baikong's entire being was filled with energy and vigor. Nongju shook her head slightly and sighed softly, "Yin Baikong is going to risk his life." Yu Qianqiu's expression was solemn. He could also see that this white flame was the human fire that only someone with a high cultivation base could ignite. Yin Baikong was clearly burning his powerful cultivation base, preparing to raise his attack power to the limit. Even if he could survive in the end at his age without the support of a powerful cultivation base, how long could he live? He was clearly throwing caution to the wind and had no intention of surviving. Yu Qianqiu sighed, "There are so many late divine transformation realm experts, is there no one who will help him?" Nongju sneered, "They are all old foxes, knowing that they are no match for him, who would still want to die. Moreover, he doesn't have a true friend." Sigh. Yin Baikong is also forced into a corner. You think he wants to? As he spoke, a protective aura quickly surged out from his body, expanding to envelop everyone. Ziyi and Farong looked at this scene in horror, the two of them tightly holding each other's hands. When Lu Mei saw this scene, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. He sneered, "Old thing, you really are tired of living, then I'll fulfill your wish." Although he said that, 2 1-meter-long green thorns suddenly appeared in his hands, flashing with a cold green light. Obviously he didn't dare to be too careless. I refuse to accept this. Yin Baikong roared, the white flame on his body surged, and he disappeared on the spot with a whoosh. Boom. Immediately after, there was an explosion in the air, only to see the green thorn in Lu Mei's hand blocking a huge sword aura that had suddenly appeared. The sword aura was easily defeated by him. However, Yin Baikong was nowhere to be seen. Just as the sword aura was defeated, another sword aura appeared out of nowhere and slashed wildly. Lu Mei's reaction was extremely fast. The green thorn in his hand was defeated without any hesitation. However, the sword aura that followed became more and more frequent. There were huge sword shadows everywhere in the air, but Yin Baikong was nowhere to be seen. Boom boom. Explosions sounded continuously, gradually enveloping Lu Mei, and he wantonly slashed wildly. On the other hand, Lu Mei dealt with the attacks with ease, a disdainful sneer on his face. The battle became more and more intense, or more accurately Yin Baikong's attacks became more and more intense, causing the weather to change. Bang bang bang. The protective formation of the treasure basin finally couldn't withstand the power of the two's battle anymore. The bottom of the formation exploded, and the entire protective formation completely collapsed. The cultivators below the soul formation stage were already unable to stand under the powerful pressure. The wind blades formed from the aftermath of the battle were as hard as steel. Some of the weaker cultivators were cut into pieces on the spot, their intestines spilling out. Immediately, many people fled in fear, quickly hiding behind the God of Wealth peak. Chapter 655. Yu Qianqiu stared at the sky and said with a frown, "What is Yin Baikong doing? Does he want to destroy the treasure that he built with his own hands? He is using teleportation to attack." Nongzhu sighed and said, "The strength gap between the two sides is too big. Only by constantly teleporting can he barely maintain his attacking posture. Otherwise, as you have seen before, he is not an opponent of the same level at all. In a head-on fight, he can't even resist one blow from his opponent." Could a soul formation final stage expert be able to teleport indefinitely? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled. He can't. That's why he ignited his cultivation and forced himself to use it. When he stops, he will be. Nongzhu shook her head. It seems like this move is useless against him. The difference in strength is too big. Could he really be an immortal from the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He couldn't answer this question either. In the sky, the endless sword energy gradually decreased. The attacks that were as dense as rain were showing signs of weakening. The green spikes in Lu Mei's hands easily broke the incoming sword energy. Then he cackled, "I thought you were more capable than I thought. So this is all you've got? What? You can't hold on anymore? Useless." What answered him was the sudden appearance of a figure, wielding a sword with both hands and slashing at his head. Lu Mei casually waved his green thorn and easily destroyed it. He clicked his tongue and said, "Can't even withstand a single blow. Really can't withstand a single blow." After a few fruitless attacks, Yin Baikong stopped. He floated in the air and panted heavily. His eyes were lifeless as he stared at Lu Mei. His black robe had been dyed dark red by blood. Drops of blood dripped from the tips of his feet. His face was pale, comparable to Lu Mei's. The group of soul formation stage lords stared at the sky in silence. They all knew that Yin Baikong was finished. "Don't have the strength to spin anymore?" Lu Mei laughed. "If that's the case, I won't play with you anymore. Boring." As soon as he finished speaking, he shot his green thorn at Yin Baikong's chest. It was fast and silent. A beautiful green light flashed. Suddenly, Yin Baikong, who seemed to have lost the ability to retaliate, suddenly disappeared. Green thorn pounced on empty air. Green eyebrows pupils constricted. A streak of light suddenly appeared on his left. It was as dazzling as the Milky Way, and it was like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. It was incredibly fast and almost reached his neck in the blink of an eye. This was the fastest sword strike Yin Baikong had ever unleashed in his entire life. His lifetime of cultivation and comprehension were all condensed into this single strike. It was soundless, yet it contained a powerful destructive power. He was prepared to finish the battle in one fell swoop. Even if he couldn't kill all of them, he had to teach them a lesson. The group of spirit-severing stage experts below suddenly became spirited. So it turned out that Yin Baikong was still hiding a trump card, purposely acting weak to make the opponent careless. As long as the opponent's reaction was even the slightest bit careless, it would be very difficult for them to escape this sword. At the very least, none of them believed that they would be able to dodge this sword strike. This was a sword strike that Yin Baikong had ignited his cultivation base. Even when Lan Feng, who had been silent all this while, had a trace of amazement in his eyes, or perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as shock. However, it was this stunning strike that missed. It had clearly struck the opponent's throat, but it turned out that it had struck an afterimage. Yin Baikong's body froze in the air. The god of wealth sword that had followed him for many years shot into the distant horizon. After it left his hand, the silver streak of light brought with it the sound of thunder and wind as it disappeared into the distance. Its final destination was unknown. Who knew if it would be fated to continue its fate with its master in the future? Green Eyebrow stood behind Yin Baikong. A green thorn in her hand had pierced through Yin Baikong's back, through his chest, and pierced through his heart. A section of the green thorn protruded from his chest, and beads of blood dripped down. Yin Baikong's pupils gradually dilated and lost their luster. Master? On the god of wealth peak, Sikongju and Jing Yuankong cried out involuntarily. The disciples of the World Commerce Association emerged one by one and looked at the scene in the sky in a daze. Sorrowful expressions emerged on their faces as they silently muttered in their hearts. The era of the World Commerce Association is over. The group of soul formation experts looked up at the sky, and they all had expressions of sympathy on their faces. Nong Zhu and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. No one could have imagined that the high-spirited Yin Baikong who was preparing for the cornucopia gathering would be finished just like that. Old ghost, you're still lacking if you want to scheme against me. Don't you know how to act a little better? Your biggest flaw is that you can still float in the air. Green Eyebrow's mouth was close to Yin Baikong's ear as he laughed sinisterly. Suddenly Yin Baikong's dilated pupils shrank and a trace of a desolate smile flashed across his face. His hands suddenly hugged the person behind him tightly. The smile on Green Eyebrow's face froze as he cried out in surprise, "Old thing you, boom?" An earth-shattering explosion drowned out Green Eyebrow's cry. A bright light exploded in the sky, and the air in this area seemed to be scared away in an instant, and Nong Zhu let out a fierce snort as the protective aura she released was instantly blasted apart by the powerful explosive airflow. Fortunately, Ziyi's reaction speed was not slow. Almost at the same time when Nong Zhu's protective aura was blasted apart, her protective aura came up again. Fortunately, although Nong Zhu's protective aura was blasted apart, it was enough to offset the remaining power of the explosion. If it wasn't for Ziyi's protective aura, the four of them would have been covered in dust. Among the group of spirit-severing experts below, except for a few spirit-severing experts in the late stage, everyone else's protective aura was blasted apart. However, it was not a big deal. After all, the experts who could become lords of a territory all had similar cultivation as Nong Zhu. However, they did not have Ziyi by their side, so they were all covered in dust. However, no one cared about this now. They all stared at the sky dumbfoundedly. Unfortunately, the dust was everywhere and no one had the ability to see through it. No one would have thought that Yin Baikong's trump card actually had a hidden move behind it. He had stored a large amount of true essence to self-destruct his Dantian. A late-stage spirit-severing expert was indeed a late-stage spirit-severing expert. After consuming a large amount of true essence, he still had such a powerful self-destructibility. Fortunately, the true essence in Yin Baikong's body had already been greatly consumed. Otherwise, the self-destruction of a late-stage spirit-severing expert would not be a joke. It was estimated that many mid-stage spirit-severing experts would more or less suffer some injuries. While everyone was feeling emotional, they were all guessing what happened to the green-robed man. Guessing was just guessing. No one went up to check. Pei Fong, who was inside the protective aura, had a twitch on his chubby face. He muttered absent-mindedly, "Didn't you promise me to settle the score in your next life? You've already self-destructed. You don't even have the chance to reincarnate. What next life are you talking about? Yin Baikong. Yin Baikong. You are indeed worthy of your title as an old fox. Even when you're F***king committing suicide, you still have a hidden move. I admire you." Everyone knew that this time Yin Baikong was really dead. He was completely dead. It was estimated that not even a piece of him could be found. Another one of the top 10 experts in the cultivation world had fallen. The dust gradually dispersed. At this moment, the god of wealth peak behind everyone suddenly let out a loud rumble. The ground shook continuously. Everyone turned their heads to look. It turned out that due to the impact of the explosion, half of the god of wealth peak had collapsed from top to bottom. there was still half of it standing there. It was an indescribably strange sight. The Hall of Wealth, on top, was still there. There was also that ancient pine tree. This was all thanks to Sikong Ju and Jing Yuankong's combined efforts. It was as if they had risked their lives to keep these two items on the God of Wealth Peak. As if sensing the disappearance of its owner, even the God of Wealth Peak was crying in a collapsing manner. With Yin Baikong's death, it was unknown whether the enormous world commerce that he had single-handedly founded would continue to exist in the cultivation world. With Yin Baikong's death, it was unknown whether Cornucopia would be rebuilt and restored to its former glory. Although the dilapidated God of Wealth Peak still stood tall, the black-robed old man who had stood under the pine tree for over 1,000 years and often stroked the rough tree trunk while gazing at the sea of clouds would no longer appear. Many people present would remember the voice and appearance of this old fox who would rather die than submit because of this self-destruction. Yu Qianqiu let out a light sigh. He didn't know what to say. Actually, Yin Baikong's death was beneficial to him. At least no one would pursue the relationship between him and the elixir. However, why did he feel that Yin Baikong's death was a little hard to accept? Was it too sudden? It was hard to explain. Hee. Old ghost, you think you can scheme against me like this? You're really an ant trying to shake a tree. You overestimate yourself. A sharp and sinister laughter came from the sky, causing everyone to turn pale with fright. They saw a transparent green ball floating in the sky where the dust had dispersed. The green-robed man was standing inside, safe and sound. That green ball was obviously something similar to a protective aura. It actually blocked Yin Baikong's self-destruction. Too strong. Everyone had this thought. They didn't expect that Yin Baikong's self-destruction wouldn't injure him in the slightest. He was really too strong. The green ball disappeared and green eyebrows landed on the ground in a flash. With his hands behind his back, he looked at everyone indifferently, as if he was looking at a group of ants. His gaze suddenly landed on Pei Fong, whose body was very conspicuous. He stretched out his hand and beckoned with his finger. You, come out, I have something to ask you. A trace of panic flashed across Pei Fong's face. He wasn't necessarily stronger than Yin Baikong. Thus, he tried his best to shrink his body, trying to shrink as much as possible. Then he pretended to look around as if he didn't know who he was calling. However, everyone's gaze was fixed on him. Little fatty, I'm talking about you. Green eyebrows proudly pointed at Pei Fong and said. Pei Fong knew that he couldn't hide anymore. If he knew that this matter would involve him, he wouldn't have stayed and watched the show. He squeezed out a smile on his fat face and walked out. He cupped his hands and said, I'm Pei Fong. What orders do you have for me? Don't be afraid. Green eyebrows casually waved his hand. He seemed to enjoy the feeling of someone trembling in front of him. He was in a good mood as he said to Pei Fong, Fatty Pei, let me ask. Oh, how did you know that my nickname is Fatty Pei? Pei Fong curiously tried to establish a relationship. Green eyebrows was stunned. His expression returned to normal as he said, Nonsense. Your surname is Pei and you're a fatty. If I don't call you Fatty Pei, what should I call you? Pei Fong didn't seem to realize that he was being scolded. Instead, he revealed an almost exaggerated expression of reverence and said in a flattering manner, You are indeed an expert. You can even think of such a question. You really have a divine plan. Chapter 656. Lu Mei looked at him in surprise and found that this guy's flattery was as good as his. But the feeling of being flattered and being flattered were two completely different things. He enjoyed it very much. But the group of lords at the spirit-severing stage had goosebumps all over their bodies. A dignified late spirit-severing expert actually behaved like this. It was like heaven and earth compared to Yin Baikong, who would rather die than submit. But they just felt uncomfortable and didn't mean to look down on him. How many of them hadn't experienced bowing and scraping before? They just didn't fawn as disgustingly as Pei Fong. Fatty Pei cut the crap. Although Lu Mei said so, there was a trace of appreciation in his eyes. Let me ask you, who here is called by Changchun? His eyes fell on Wenlan Feng, Hu Changshou, Ouyangda, and Qi Jiujuan. These four were the ones with the highest cultivation. Ah! Pei Fong screamed and then asked hesitantly, You are looking for Bai Changchun? To be exact, he was startled and so were the others. Even if the person in front of them might be from the immortal world, it didn't seem to be more frightening than Bai Changchun. After all, Bai Changchun's despotic power had suppressed them for so many years that they were all scared to the bone. Everyone looked at each other. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. Who was this person? Why did he come here to look for Bai Changchun? Was Bai Changchun also in contact with people from the immortal world? Lu Mei narrowed his eyes and took in everyone's reaction. He smiled and said, "It seems that Bai Changchun is here." "Who is Bai Changchun? Come out and answer me." The surroundings were quiet and no one dared to say anything. Then again, after being suppressed by Bai Changchun for so many years, who dared to talk about Bai Changchun in front of so many people? After waiting for a while, no one spoke. Lu Mei's green eyebrows trembled and he sneered, "Fatty Pei, point out to me who is Bai Changchun." Pei Fong was shocked. Whether it was Bai Changchun or this strange green-robed man, he couldn't afford to offend them. He didn't know if these two were friends or enemies, but from the way they spoke, it was more likely that they were enemies. It was better to figure it out before dealing with them. Thus, with a face full of smiles, he nodded and bowed as he asked, "May I know why you are looking for Bai Changchun?" If someone else had asked a question instead of replying, Green Eyebrow would have been unhappy. However, Pei Fong's respectful attitude made him feel comfortable. He snorted coldly and said, "Bai Changchun, you destroyed the gate to the underworld and angered the underworld emperor. He sent me here to punish you. Why do you think I'm looking for him?" It was so quiet that one could hear the chirping of birds in the distant forest and the gentle breeze. Everyone was stunned. Bai Changchun had actually reached the legendary underworld gate and even destroyed it? The number one expert in the world was indeed the number one expert in the world. He was too bold to actually dare to mess with the netherworld. As a result, even the legendary emperor of the underworld was alerted, and this person was actually an emissary from the underworld? No wonder it was so powerful. Nongzhu rolled her dead fish eyes and slowly tilted her head to stare at Yu Qianqiu. The latter's face twitched as he smiled embarrassedly. Now the two completely understood. It turned out that the destruction of the underworld gate had attracted this god of plague. Yin Baikang's death was a little unjust. Bai Changchun was also wronged. But what Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out was why the other party didn't look for him, the culprit, but his master. He looked at Nongzhu with an inquiring look. Nongzhu transmitted her voice with extreme disdain, "No need to guess. It must be the trouble caused by the words left on the wall of the underworld cave. Otherwise, no matter how famous your master is, the people of the underworld wouldn't know his name. When you go back, quickly erase the words on the wall for me." It seemed that having bad handwriting had its benefits. At least it wasn't that easy to recognize. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Pei Fong had a dull expression on his face. He really didn't know what to say. But Green Eyebrow wouldn't let him get away with it. He asked again, "Fatty Pei, who is Bai Changchun? Point it out to me or else." Pei Fong's face was bitter and he was almost crying. He wanted to test whether the strange green-robed man was Bai Changchun's friend or foe. If it was a friend, he would naturally tell the truth. If it was an enemy, he could also tell the truth. It would be great if he could get rid of Bai Changchun with the help of the strange green-robed man. Bing Qingzi ran away and Yin Baikang died. If Bai Changchun, who was above him, also died, he would be very comfortable in the future. But he never thought that Bai Changchun would dare to provoke the underworld. This was a little too ridiculously strong. In this case, if Bai Changchun and the strange green-robed man fought, it was still uncertain who would win. But if Bai Changchun won, how could he let go of the informant? If he lied, the green-robed man would definitely get even with him. It was difficult. The group of lords of the soul formation stage also looked at him with sympathy. They could all understand his feelings. "Do you want me to force you to say it?" Green Eyebrow was a little impatient. Pei Fong had no other choice. He had to get through this first. He was just telling the truth. Bai Changchun shouldn't be so petty, right? He coughed and said with a wry smile, "It's not that I don't want to point it out, but Bai Changchun isn't here at all. Bai Changchun is the world's number one expert. He lives in the demon domain all year round. Why would he hang out with small figures like us?" His words were very respectful to Bai Changchun. He completely had an attitude of not offending either side. The world's number one expert? No wonder he dares to say that he's invincible in the world. Green Eyebrow sneered. Suddenly he was startled and his eyes flickered. "You said Bai Changchun lives in the demon domain?" He remembered that the female ghost cultivator had said that the place shrouded by the dark clouds was the demon domain. "That's right," Pei Fong explained. "Bai Changchun is the world's number one expert. He leads the thousands of demon kings and ghost king in the entire demon domain. He is the master of the demon domain." Hee hee. Green Eyebrow suddenly laughed sharply. He understood everything and instantly said with a murderous expression, "So he is the master of the demon domain. No wonder that female ghost cultivator dared to lie to me. When I go back, the first person I'll deal with is you, bitch. I'll let you know what it means to beg for death." As soon as he finished speaking, his whole body turned into a green light and flew away. Seeing him leave just like that, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at the messy treasure bowl, everyone was speechless. However, at this moment, another green light flashed in the sky and turned into a human figure. Who else could it be but the strange green-robed man who had just left? Why did he come back? When everyone's heart was pounding, Green Eyebrow pointed to Pei Fong, who was surprised, and said, "Fatty Pei, let me ask you again. Who are Nanhai Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu? Where do these two people live?" Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were stunned when they heard this. Now they were 100% sure that it was the words left on the ghost cave that caused the trouble. Both of them were blaming their own hands and their hearts. Yu Qianqiu wanted to slip away immediately. He said to Nongzhu, "Let's go. While he doesn't know who we are, let's go quickly." Nongzhu agreed. The two of them grabbed Ziyi and Furong and wanted to run away. "Stop!" With a sharp shout, Green Eyebrow's eyes locked directly on them. There was no other reason. When he said that, everyone subconsciously turned to look at them. Their eyes betrayed them. The four of them paused and slowly turned around. Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu had the same bright and harmless smile on their faces, but Ziyi and Furong were obviously very afraid. Green Eyebrow pointed at them and said, "Come here." Yu Qianqiu secretly transmitted his voice to the three of them, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. He can't do anything to us. Follow me closely. Don't be too far away from me. When the critical moment comes, I have a way to help you escape." "Damn it. Brat, why are you still pretending to be mysterious at a critical moment? I know you're good at escaping. If you want to escape, you should do it now. Why are you waiting for the critical moment? If you wait any longer, I'll be scared to death. Hurry up." Nongzhu secretly transmitted his voice and urged. Yu Qianqiu didn't bother to pay attention to him. He wouldn't reveal his last secret unless it was absolutely necessary. Then, he held Furong's hand and gave her a firm look that said, "Trust me." When Furong saw that, she was relieved. She didn't even want to think about it and believed him without any reason. Quietly, she was led away by him by the hand. "Bastard, I'll deal with you later." Nongzhu secretly transmitted his voice and complained. But she had no choice. With her cultivation, she couldn't escape with Ziyi at all. She could only place her last hope on Yu Qianqiu. So, she pulled Ziyi and followed closely behind Yu Qianqiu. When the four of them came in front of Lu Mei, Yu Qianqiu squeezed Furong's hand and let go. He cupped his hands and said, "May I know why Lord Envoy of Hell is looking for us?" Lu Mei glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly her pupils shrank. She realized that she couldn't see through his cultivation. She was secretly shocked. She slowly turned to Pei Fong and asked, "Who are the four of them?" Pei Fong looked at Furong and stuttered. He didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu quickly changed the topic. He smiled and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Lord Envoy of Hell is looking for Yu Qianqiu and Nongzhu? I know where they are." Everyone looked at each other suspiciously. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was trying to do. However, they admired his courage. He wasn't afraid at all in the face of such a terrifying monster. Lu Mei looked at his calm face and became more and more suspicious. Why didn't he notice the four people in the corner at the beginning? "Oh," he said, "then tell me where they are. I don't have time to talk nonsense here." He was in a hurry to leave. Although he was arrogant before, he had accumulated the mentality of a small person over the years. It couldn't be changed so easily. He instinctively thought that this person was not afraid of him at all. In addition, he couldn't see through his cultivation, so he was more or less afraid. What kind of person was Yu Qianqiu? In his previous life, he had mingled with the nobodies in the marketplace. It could be said that he was very familiar with the mentality of those nobodies. He could tell at a glance what kind of character the other party was. He was a coward. Now that he had a way to protect himself, his face turned cold. He slowly put his hands behind his back. He stared at Lu Mei and walked toward her step by step. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.